Hello everyone. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. Honorable Registrar, Sir, Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology, deemed to be University, Professor Ganaranjan Mohanty, Honorable Head, CIR, and Professor of Eminence, KIIT University, Professor Sudarshan Nanda, Honorable Vice Chancellor, KIIT University, Professor Hrushikesha Mohanty, Honorable Associate Dean, School of Humanities, KIIT University, Professor S.C. Swain, sir, esteemed speakers of today's webinar, my dear colleagues, academicians, current and future research scholars, and all other participants. I, Arpita, on behalf of School of Humanities, KIIT University, extend my heartiest welcome to you all to this one-day international webinar on methods, tools, and techniques in the current research, linguistics, and beyond, organized by the School of Humanities, KIIT University. Thank you all for joining us today. So methods, tools, and techniques in the research, which is the theme for today's webinar. Just going by the concept note, the present webinar aims to help the researchers to achieve a better understanding of the theoretical underpinning of various research methods, tools, and techniques in the current research of linguistics. It also aims to help the researcher to gain knowledge regarding the ethics of field works and procedures of data elicitation in order to obtain a reliable and valid outcome in their research works. So now we would proceed to the inaugural session of today's event. We are privileged to have with us Professor Ganaranjan Mohanty, Registrar, KIIT University in today's event. Now I would request sir to kindly inaugurate the session with a few words. Over to you, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, Dr. Goswami. So shall I start?
Yes, sir. Start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Goswami. A very good afternoon to all of you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Hrushikesha Mohanty, esteemed Professor of Eminence and Research Chair, Professor Sudarshan Nanda, respected Associate Dean School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Sukant Chandra Swain, respected convener of this webinar, Dr. Arpita Goswami, and esteemed speakers of today's webinar, most respected my colleagues, faculty members from School of Humanities and Social Sciences, and esteemed delegates present in this virtual session. I am honored to be here in this virtual inauguration meeting for the international webinar on methods, tools, and techniques in the current research, linguistic and beyond. On behalf of KIIT deemed to be University, an institution of eminence, I am privileged to welcome all the esteemed invited speaker, Professor Sandagomi Coperahewa from University of Colombo, Dr. Paroma Sanyal from IIT Delhi, Dr. Anindita Sahoo, IIT Chennai, Madras, to this virtual session. My sincere gratitude to all of them for accepting our invitation to deliver their address in this virtual session. Hope we'll meet in the premises of KIIT University or some other occasion when the conditions are normal. I wish this international webinar will serve as a platform to inspire our young researchers and PhD scholars to start their research work on linguistic and ELT. And I am sure our faculty members of the School of Humanities will definitely be inspired from the profile of the invited speakers, and from the prolific speakers prolific invited speakers, and will follow up their research work. Hope they will get some idea and scientific resources from the speakers. As the world moves more and more towards online interactions and electronic communication, the reliance on machines to rectify and beautify language increases at a rapid pace. The software industry is working harder than ever to conduct research, to develop voice assistants, translation tools, and AI-powered grammar checkers. We are in an era of big data, which is punctuated by a large scale of surveys and corpus research, as well as an era of highly nuanced qualitative research, which is characterized by contextualized explorations of language learning and language use. So all this calls for full-fledged assistance and collaboration from the linguistic fraternity. Dear delegates, KIIT University is known for creating social impact in the society. It is unique in the sense that it is integrating professional education with social concerns. The core value of our university are bonded with the principles of kindness, compassion, empathy, and discipline. Our university's solemn academic ambience has led to institution of eminence status being granted by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. So now it is in the bracket of 20 best institutions of India, including IITs and IIM. Being one of the youngest university in India, we are progressing dynamically under the charismatic leadership of Honorable Founder, KIIT and KISS, Professor Achyut Samanta. And quality education and research is the hallmark of our university. We know for any success or success of any webinar or conference, how much pain the organizers usually take. I, on behalf of the university, earnestly thank the organizers and the entire team of School of Humanities. With this, I wish success of this international webinar. Once again, I welcome all the esteemed speakers. So thank you all. My sincere thanks and best wishes to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your motivating words. And we are really fortunate to have you in today's event. Thank you very much for your time and for your presence in today's inauguration program. Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to request Professor Sudarshan Nanda, Head CIR and Professor of Eminence, to share a few words with us.
Good afternoon to all present here. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yeah. So it is a great opportunity and a privilege for me to be associated here today in this webinar, and I join our Vice Chancellor, Registrar, entire KIIT family on behalf of entire KIIT family, starting from our Honorable Founder, to welcome you all the speakers and all the delegates, outside delegates who have joined this meeting, and express my thanks to the organizer, Dr. Arpita Goswami, and the entire Humanities School, their Associate Dean, and all. So Registrar has already told everything. I don't have to tell much things. We have become IOE, so we have become one of the best universities. Therefore, not only that we want to state these days are very much competitive days. So it is difficult to reach a level and more difficult to go further and further. Even there are dangers to stay at that level even, because once we become slack and lazy, casual, then there is every danger to fall down. Our aim is under the leadership of our honorable founder. Our aim of all our colleagues is to go further and further in research. Therefore, even if these difficult days and were not possible to hold conferences, we organize many conferences every day. But it's difficult to organize such conferences by inviting people personally here. We have been organizing, our colleagues have been organizing webinars because we want to go further and further in research and to bring the institute further and to bring our individual faculty members alone all over the world. So research is the most important thing. Other components are also important, but research is most important. Therefore, only through these meetings we can learn, we can exchange our ideas with the great researchers, and we can get collaborators. So that is why special thanks goes to the invited speakers, without whom, without their help, and we would not have been able to organize this and achieve this. And not only that, we are seeking their help now, and they have agreed to help us. We expect them to help for all times to come. And when situation register has already told, when situation improves, we shall invite you to come to the campus personally to see KIIT, as well as the sister institute KISS, which is KIIT is one of the best in the world, whereas KISS is the only institute in the world and provides free education to downtrodden, the people who had never seen the light, who have never, they live in forests and hills, never been educated. Therefore, their parents, forefathers were never been educated. And education can only bring prosperity and allow people to live with dignity. That is the motto of our founder. So that institute is even more important than ours. So whenever you come, you will get an opportunity to visit both the institutes. Besides academic, all day brainstorming. Then if you go through the institutes, both the institutes, and so much facilities available, that will give you a great experience. And so we are waiting for those days. Time will improve. So regarding this subject, I don't know anything. I know nothing about the literature, linguistics and all that. But whatever I can say, the multi-fuzzy logic, multivariable logic is useful very much to get better results. And there are research papers. I have seen some papers, although I have not gone through and I have not understood, but I have seen some papers using multivalue logic, fuzzy logic, which was discovered by Jade 1965. And you can get better results in linguistics. I'm not sure some of our speakers might be working in those areas. And our faculty, I should suggest that they should, after this webinar, they should also do some literature survey. And if they need my help to give some lectures to teach them fuzzy logic, I am here available and prepared. And from the big civilization, beginning of the civilization, two-valued logic was already dominating. Precisely one and only one out of the two. Yes, exclusively no. Exclusively yes and exclusively no. There is nothing in between. But human brain, human thought process, language, literature, nature, science, every branch of knowledge, every branch of science, social science, literature, language, and human thought process, human thinking is not like that. So therefore, two-value logic is not the language of human beings. Multi-value logic, infinite value logic, continuum value logic is the language of human beings, the language of nature and society. So with these words, I wish the conference to be most success. Conferences are important, but what happens after that is more important, particularly for our faculty members. We would like to know after some time whether the respected speakers and outstanding researchers, whether our faculty members or organizers are continuing a collaboration or contact with them, whether they are able to write some paper in collaboration with them. That is most important. And that is how we grow. We want to grow. That's why our faculty members, that they know this, and that's why they are arranging so many conferences, inviting so many researchers. With these words, I again welcome the all outstation speakers and participants, and thank our colleagues, and wish the conference webinar to be most successful. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your insightful words. And I'm really thankful to you for going through my proposal and approving it. Without your permission, the webinar could not have seen the light of the day. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence. Thank you. Now we are privileged to have with us Professor Hrushikesha Mohanty, Vice Chancellor, KIIT University in today's event. I kindly request sir to share your thoughts with us.
Namaskar. Thank you, Dr. Arpita, for inviting me to share some of my thoughts with this conference. I would like to say that the theme is quite far from me, but nevertheless, it's my privilege to invite all the distinguished speakers today for this conference, Dr. Sahoo, Dr. Sanyal, Dr. Sandagomi. I mean, they're the real workers. They work so hard in this area. I could see some of their publications also. I was in the meantime I was browsing through what is actually this subject is about. So, however, no. I am really I appreciate the school and the colleagues over there for organizing. I think this is the third webinar, and I, on behalf of the university, on behalf of Professor Nanda, the head CIR, and the Registrar, Professor Gyananand Mohanty, I welcome all of you, the participants, and the today's speakers for attending this, and all my dear colleagues in the School of HSS, and also the Associate Dean, Dr. Swain, who is just, the steering the school and in this difficult time. And this is so nice of organizing in series of seminars, webinars in different themes, and particularly as the previous two, this is also very interesting theme. The theme on the tools and techniques. I think that is where I think the literature, the humanities, which is traditionally thought that they are soft, they become hard here, opting for the tools and the techniques. So I think it is not today. I think if you go long back, and the Panini who has given the grammar uh, to us, to the whole humanity, in fact, is the first linguist. If you see, the human civilization has seen the Panini, which we discovered quite late, and the modern linguist, probably I think I should take the name of Professor Noam Chomsky, the Chomsky's hierarchy of language, which is the computer scientist and linguist, everybody has taken it. But the science of the language, which we see that, I think that is the first. The Panini has given where the Sanskrit language is so much rigorous, and because it is rigorous, it follows a rule. So it seems to be quite nearer to the computing linguists. So this is where now the linguists, the computing linguists, they try to see that where if there is the mathematical computational framework which maps from one language to the another language with with carrying with the semantics also. This is what I think the Professor Raj Reddy, I don't know how many of you are following the RAISE 2020. Now this is the last day. If the RAISE 2020, which Government of India is organizing on the web, I think the Registrar sir has already circulated this to all of you. I think all over the country, and they are watching that where this AI, the computational techniques, can be used for all the disciplines, not only the engineering. It is the humanities, linguists, and in this inaugural ceremony, the Professor Raj Reddy, who has won the highest award in the computer science, Turing Award. So is equivalent to the Nobel of computing science. And he gave a statement that the India must opt for the techniques, the computational linguist, to provide the bridge between different languages, the multiple languages what we have in our country. This is what is his remark, and I was hearing to the Honorable Prime Minister, he took it very serious. I think now you could see that many programs, many efforts, the national effort will be on the bridging of the language using the computational techniques. So this is, and if I mapped, that is the what the today's call is nation call. I think in that context, this webinar is well fit actually. I congratulate Dr. Arpita to set this tone of the webinar of this theme. I think this must go forward. So this is, I think, and Dr. Sahoo, the speaker, Dr. Sanyal, and Dr. Sandagomi, they must have a very academic observations in this subject. And I don't want to just go into that and wish I can have the recording of it and can listen. I can be excused for not being able to listen to their talks, but certainly it is very interesting for me to listen to them. And this is a very interesting things. But actually, uh, I got more attracted to the last word that tells that beyond. You know? So this is what the title goes, that method, tools, techniques in the current research, linguistics and beyond. So I was wondering, what is this beyond? What exactly the beyond is? I think there is a. I was thinking over it. I think there is something in that beyond. I think beyond this computational techniques, all these things, I think the language has got much more than to it, much more to it. I think, I think there is a small book by Professor B.N. Patnaik. He is a very renowned linguist. I think he has a book called The Language Matters. I think if you have not read, would like to recommend you to read this very small book. I think there it tells that what is the beyond. So what actually the beyond it means. So the the evolution of language is very, very interesting. And I'm just going through a very old epic. And I will suggest the language scientists to look at the epics and see that you will find such a word which will totally will be very, very new, and you will get stuck. Is that how what this word means? And that you just look at these epics and see these words and try to think that what is the science. Is there science has got a meaning to it? How this word has been coined by the particular poet or particular writer. Mostly the old writers were the poets. If you see the medieval too, at least in Pudia, I see that many are the poets. So this how this suppose like Bhimavai writes that Ranchila. Ranchila is not a in contemporary Odia. There is no word called Ranchila. So, but no, how this word, how did it come? This word, what exactly this word mean? I think you will find a treasure of the research themes if you look into these epics. So I don't want to take much time into it, but I would certainly appreciate the School of Humanities and Social Science. I think the jewel of the all these multidisciplinary in the KIIT University. I think you have from engineering to the medical and the fine arts and everything. I think the so many heterogeneous disciplines has been the hallmark of this KIIT University. And it is not only the heterogeneity in the different disciplines, it is the heterogeneity of the students. You have students from POS colony of Bombay or Delhi, and you also have a student from down on up Koraput Hills. That is where you see the KIS is what the Professor Nanda was referring to. I think this is the hallmark. This is the so much inclusiveness with this with the university, which the honorable founder has set the tone that how this civilization has to work with the inclusiveness and also try to seek for the more and more knowledge, the creation of the knowledge and discovery of the knowledge. So this is why being the spirit of the university, and in that spirit, I appreciate the School of Humanities and Social Science is well groomed or the well effort in that spirit to excel. And I also would like to see some webinars from the social science, sociology, and also from economics. I think these are the two also very, very exciting subjects. I think in the contemporary time, these two streams also should conduct some webinar of interesting subjects, and we look forward to that. And I wish that a very nice session, and of the discussions and the participation by all the participants, the students and the participants from outside, and wish once after the pandemic you can have a. I wish that you will make a really full-fledged a linguistic conference. That will take a long way. If you want to, it's not just to have a. So Professor Nanda was telling that you must take a photo of it. You have Dr. Sahoo, Dr. Sanyal, Dr. Sandagomi. You have a beautiful network. I think with the network, try to do something very very original. And Dr. Sahoo, I saw she works also on Oriya language. I saw some of her papers. I think I welcome you, and I wish all the best, and wish that I hope that you will email me the video recording so that I can listen to it later. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful and insightful words, and thank you for your recommendation of the books and epics. We will definitely go through it, and thank you for motivating us to organize such webinar. And yeah, when our life will be normal, so that time I will try to organize a webinar on a conference or seminar in linguistics. Thank you, sir, for your motivation, and we are really fortunate to have your guidance with us. Thank you, sir, very much. So now I would like to request Professor S. Swain, Associate Dean, School of Humanities, KIT University, to share a few words before we move on to the technical session of today's event. Sir, over to you. Yes, sir.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Hrushikesha Mohanty sir, uh, respected Head CIR Professor Sudarshan Nanda sir, esteemed Registrar Professor Gyanaranjan Mohanty sir, respected convener of this webinar Dr. Arpita ma'am, distinguished speakers of this webinar, faculty members of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, and all distinguished participants of this webinar. A very good afternoon to all of you. So I'd like to thank all our university authorities for promoting us, for guiding us to conduct webinars during this critical time. As VC sir told, it is the third webinar from our school, and the first two were in digital humanities and cultural studies, and this is on research point. And as sir is expecting, we will come as per his expectation, and we are planning for a webinar on economics and management, and it will be happening very soon. So I would like to thank the convener, Professor Arpita Goswami, for selecting a pertinent topic, that is methods, tools, and techniques in current research, linguistic and beyond. And sir was highlighting, VC sir was highlighting on beyond, is that beyond is really the critical point for this webinar, because primarily this research analysis, research discussion will be on linguistic, but it is not completely restricted to linguistic. Other allied fields will also be discussed in this webinar. And very tactfully, very nicely, the convener has put three important objectives of this webinar. One is the basics of methodology, methods, and techniques. Then ethics in research, and third is quality. These three are the three important pillars of a good research in any field, not only in linguistic or literature. It is applicable for research in all the fields. I am not a man from literature or linguistics, but I am having the privilege to go through some research outputs, findings of linguistic research and literature research. I am basically from social sciences. Traditionally, people from linguistic or literature, they're going by qualitative research. But the trend has been changed. Now people are going by the quantitative research, and some researchers are also going by the mixed methods research. So I'll be speaking a few words on this mixed methods research. It is particularly applicable, very nicely applicable to the social science research, but in humanities also, in English literature also, in linguistic also, it can be applicable. I have gone through some of the research findings. They have done it through this mixed method research, where they have nicely integrated the qualitative data and quantitative data. While getting the quantitative data, they have gone inferential statistics, inferential mode, and also simulation method. And while getting the qualitative data, they have gone for focus group discussion, in-depth interviews, Delphi technique, lot many things. But my concern here is, while going for the mixed methods research, it is good that that will strengthen and expand the conclusion of the study. But many times we have seen the researchers have done two sets of analysis, one on the basis of quantitative data and another on the basis of qualitative data. But they failed to converge, integrate the findings of both set of analysis. That is the main concern for this mixed methods research. Of course, I will not blame the all researchers, but some researchers, they have done it nicely. They have integrated, converged the findings of both the data set nicely. But in some of the researches I have found, they have presented it independently without going by the integration. Because we are having today three distinguished speakers, they will be highlighting these three aspects. So hopefully they must have answer to this, that how to design the research methodology in the field of linguistic and allied fields, so that the mixed methods can be used effectively in the sense they could be converged, integrated appropriately to get a better result, better findings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind and motivating words and for your insights on the research methods. It will help us in a significant way. And I'm really thankful to you for your continuous support and to organize this webinar. Thank you very much, sir. So now we would proceed to the technical session of today's webinar. So today we have an esteemed panel of speakers, Professor Sandagomi Coperahewa, Professor and Head, Department of Sinhala, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. We have with us Dr. Paroma Sanyal, Associate Professor in Linguistics, Department of Humanities and Social Science, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, India. We are also joined by Dr. Anindita Sahoo, Assistant Professor in Linguistics, Department of Humanities and Social Science, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai. So now we shall move on to the first presentation of today's event. I would request my colleague, Dr. Sahil, to introduce our first honorable speaker and to moderate the session. Over to you, Sahil. Dr. Sahil, it's all yours.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to introduce such a huge personality in the field of linguistics. Good afternoon to one and all present here. I am Sahil Mohammad Dilabul Hussain, Assistant Professor, School of Humanities, KIIT. On behalf of KIIT, School of Humanities, I welcome you all to the first session of the international webinar on methods, tools, and techniques in current research, linguistics, and beyond. I feel the privilege to welcome and introduce the speaker for this session, Dr. Sandagomi Coperahewa. Welcome, sir. Dr. Coperahewa is a professor and the head of the head in the Department of Sinhala, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. He graduated from the University of Colombo with a BA honors degree in Sinhala and obtained his master's in language studies from the Lancaster University, UK. He received his MPhil in Sinhala from the University of Peradeniya and completed his PhD in South Asian Studies from the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, University of Cambridge, UK. A linguist by training, Professor Coperahewa has published several Sinhala and English publications on Sinhala language, grammar, and language planning in Sri Lanka. As an expert on Sinhala language, he provides consultancy to many government and other institutions on various language planning projects. Apart from his main research area, as the founder director of the Center of Contemporary Indian Studies, University of Colombo, Professor Coperahewa is actively engaged in various research and collaborative projects related to Rabindranath Tagore and contemporary India. I want to express that School of Humanities KIIT is indeed honored to have you here for the program. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. Today, we will be listening to Professor Coperahewa on the topic Research Methods in Social Linguistics. We look forward to the lecture. Before we start, I would like to request all the participants to post your queries in the chat box at the end of the session for further interaction. Now, I would hand over the podium to Professor Coperahewa to start the interaction. Professor Coperahewa, over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Very good afternoon to you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
audible.
Yes, thank you very much. And first, I would like to thank the organizers, especially the Vice Chancellor and all the delegates from the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology. I'm very happy to hear this event and thank you very much for inviting me. And I think especially my last visit to Bhubaneswaram was in 2015 for a seminar on Kalinga Lanka. That was my last visit, so I enjoyed my stay in Odisha, in Bhubaneswaram in 2015. And so I accepted this invitation as well. This topic on methods, tools, and techniques in the current research, linguistics, and beyond. And I would like to especially thank Dr. Arpita Goswami for inviting me, especially for this event, and distinguished scholars, participants, and dear students. My training, as you heard, is in the area of social linguistics, the social study of language. So I thought for this seminar to discuss about the research methods in social linguistics, especially on this topic related to your theme of the webinar, methods, tools, and techniques in the current research, linguistic and beyond. So my presentation will focus mainly in the area of doing research in social linguistics. By training, my training is mainly in the area of language policy planning, but at the same time on sociology of grammar and modern Sinhala usage. So this is my my presentation. The outline of the presentation. I will first look at the generally the study of language, the social study of, and the connection between the social study of language and linguistics, the notion of language and why we study language in social context. And I will just focus on the area of approaches in social linguistic research, especially during the last few years. Just go back to I have a problem in screen sharing. Can you go back to, then especially but I will look at the methods and methodology in research, especially what do you mean by methods and the methodology. And what is important for this, even for this seminar, especially for students, the mixing of these mixed methods, especially the blending qualitative and quantitative approaches. This is very interesting kind of a phenomena that we need to discuss. Maybe some other scholars also will look into this, the mixed methods in linguistics research. And at the same time, it's very important to look at the social linguistic data and methods of data collection. what type of data, and the methods of data collection. And finally, I will look at as for any kind of research, the sampling and the ethical issues. So finally, I will go for some practical tips. Yeah, please go to the next slide. Yeah. So as we know, the linguistics is the field of the scientific study of language is conducted within the field of linguistics. And as we all know, it's a multidisciplinary, and specialists in many disciplines bring their own expertise to the study of language. During the last 50 years, even like in India, but even Sri Lanka, especially when you look at the Sri Lankan context here, the linguistics is been a university subject for the last 50 years. So, and there will be many specialists have come from many areas to the study of language. And so it may be anthropology, it may be sociology, so bringing other disciplines to the area of language. And also linguists share many, there's a number of assumptions about language, and they approach the study of language from different theoretical perspectives that we will be looking to, especially the idea of, as the earlier speaker mentioned about the Chomsky. So, for example, the linguists influenced by Noam Chomsky's views on language, they believe that language is primarily a product of the mind. So that is the natural language. And they are more concerned with the studying the linguistic competence. So this is what is important is the properties of the natural language and the social language. So what my focus here is mainly on the social language. So language as a natural fact, and also language as a social fact. So doing research, looking at language as a social phenomenon or as a social language. So this is a kind of a debate. So doing research in social linguistics is social language. And linguistic theory mainly focuses on the structure of the language, looking at the structure of language, and it does not concern itself with the context in which the language is learned and how it is used by the speakers. But as we know, the language is a social product with rich variation along individual, community, and societal lines. So this is very important to look language as this area of the social linguistics. Go to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. And the social linguistics is a field that studies the language in relation to society. For example, the early scholars like Hudson and recent scholars like Bernard Spolsky have been written a lot about the area and the discipline of social linguistics, looking at the use of language and the social structure in which the users of language use. And this is very important, looking at or examining language in its social context, how it actually used by people, not the natural language, but not the competence as but we're looking at more on the communicative competence, how it actually used by people. So this involves looking at the social characteristics of language users, social class, ethnicity, age, gender, identity, etc. For example, for a country like India, it's a very kind of a diverse situation about looking at language. And so first part, I will just look into the area of social linguistics as being a diverse academic field since its start in the 1960s as a separate discipline. And in this early period, the scholars from linguistics, anthropology, and sociology came together because of their collective interest in the study of language in its social context. For example, the early scholars, especially the research conducted by John Gumpers, Dale Himes, and is more on the anthropological kind of view on language. And but the research of 1960s and 70s was innovative because it asked different kinds of research questions. But now, especially the students who are participating in this webinar, need to look at the early research questions in social linguistics and the research questions in the last few years in the area of social linguistics, especially research questions, how it compared. For example, the famous figure, the William Labov dissertation in 1963-2006 was the first work to study dialect patterns in an urban area on a large scale, especially the New York studies in the urban setting. So this language variation and change has emerged as a major area of social linguistic research, mainly due to the pioneering research of William Labov, the American linguist. So what is important here is to look at the Labov. We consider him as a scholar who has had the greatest influence on social linguistic research in the contemporary era, especially in the last maybe in the last century, the late 1960s and 70s. So what is important here is the view as the founder of the variationist social linguistics. So Labov established the modern methodologies for collecting and analyzing data. So this is we need to look at when you are discussing these methods, tools, and techniques, the methodologies for collecting and analyzing data from language in use. So this is looking at the language as a kind of a social fact. So when you focus our attention, especially when we think about this variation in social linguistics, it integrates social and linguistic aspects of language, not only the linguistic but social. So there are two sides. One is the synchronic variation, the variation at a single point of time, and variation over time, or a language change, or a diachronic variation. So these are the two kind of main in variation is social linguistics. So look at the two sides of. But in the 20th century, especially in the last few decades, due to the disciplinary and methodological distinctions, social linguistics has crystallized into its own field. Now, as you have seen, there are so many works and handbooks on social linguistic research, and especially what you are to cover by this analyzing social linguistic variation. There have been so many work has been done, and social linguistic research thus aims to explore social and linguistic diversity in order to better understand how we see as speakers use language to inhabit and negotiate our many personal, cultural, and social identities and roles. So this is we have to consider these areas, especially as speakers use language to inhabit and negotiate, and our many all the other personal and cultural and social identities and roles. So any social linguistic project must have two parts. One is the social linguistic problem. So that is what we call it as a research question. So any project has have two projects. One is the social linguistic problem and is the appropriate data to address it. So this is very important, especially if you are working on a social linguistic project. Look at what is the problem and the data, and especially if you look at a country like India, especially a linguistic giant. So there are so many languages, and so how to do when you embark on a study on linguistic research in a multilingual country like India, so many languages, and or you look at India as the Eminence term as India as a linguistic area, many multilingual settings, and again bilingual, again diaglottic situations like in my own language like Sinhala, or in Tamil, or maybe in other Indian languages as well, where languages are used for distinct functions, chord switching, research on the reasons for language shift and depth, and also there are other areas like new research areas in social linguistics like Pidgin and Creole languages. So what is important is, as you can see, these vast area, or the diverse area of research in social linguistics, especially if you look at the situations like India. And the most fundamental challenge for any social linguistic research is how to obtain appropriate data. So this is very important to how to obtain appropriate data for analyze. Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, you can see I will focus my attention to generally on research, because we are doing research in terms of as an exercise in the production of knowledge. So it is we are doing, especially if you are attached to any university, you'll be doing the research in an organized and formalized and institutionalized practice. So this is very important to look at. Systematic research in any field of inquiry involves two basic questions. One is the data collection, and that is observe, you measure and record the information, and the second on data analysis. So that is why we need methods and tools to arrange and organize these data so that we may discover their significance, or if you need to generalize about them or to tell what they mean. So there are two aspects that is very common to anybody who knows about what is research. And this is very important. Now, researchers often confuse the methods with methodologies. What do you mean by methods and what do you mean by methodologies? So methods refer to practical steps, but the methodologies is different. So methods refers to practical steps as approaches necessary for the collection and interpretation of data, or we can very simply say the procedures and techniques. That is, those are the methods and methodologies. So methodologies are mainly concerned with theoretical and philosophical assumptions. Especially any researchers who is working on methodology, it's all about their theoretical orientation. So methodologies are usually associated with different theories of the field. For example, in social linguistics, there are different theories of social, whether it is about the language change or about the pidgin of Creole or about any. So there are many theories. So it is important to look at this difference between methods and methodology. So methods are mainly the practical steps. So methodologies are usually associated with different theories of the field. Okay, so if you move on to the other areas of this, our presentation, especially on our topic, the research methods in social linguistics. So what is important is for a researcher, especially if you are a if you are a beginner in research in social linguistics, mainly choosing an appropriate research method. So this is very important to find an important research method for making critical choices in research. So appropriate research method. And also we know the methods differ from research to research. Now, for example, my own work, most of my work focuses on language planning and policy. But if I'm working on a different project, even in social linguistics, my methods are different. So in social sciences and humanities, there are two types of research. That is quantitative methods and qualitative. So these are in common kind of terms. You know what you mean by quantitative methods and qualitative methods. In general, the quantitative research, we are doing quantitative data, mainly specifies the numerical assignments to the phenomenon under study. For example, collecting data in terms of figures, whereas qualitative research produces kind of a narrative or textual descriptions. For example, if you're looking at the identity or language standardization, standard language or language change, more come the kind of the character of the research is mainly narrative or textual. But at the same time, what we can do is the blending both qualitative and quantitative methods in social linguistic research. So this is very interesting because the mixed method system. So mixing methods. So I would like to say it's kind of blending both qualitative and quantitative. And if you look at and according to various scholars, especially I would like to recommend this book by Holmes and Hazen, Research Methods in Social Linguistics, a kind of a practical guide. Now, both scholars they say some social linguistic research relies on experimental and quantitative data, with those researchers using statistical tests on abstracted data. But other social linguistic research adopts more sociological or anthropological approach, conducting qualitative analysis. So this is very important to look at social linguistics from you're looking at quantitative data and qualitative data. And many different research goals and different methodologies can be found under the label of social linguistics. Look at since the time of Labo to present day, for example, early studies by scholars, especially by the Indian scholars on this issue of in the area of Indian social linguistics. So look at especially those qualitative analysis from a more sociological and anthropological approach, but at the same time bringing quantitative data for social linguistic research. Okay, so if you move on to especially on the methods of data collection, the next slide, please. Yeah, the methods of data collection. So I would like to focus on few areas. That is, if I am not, I have some more time. The methods of data collection. The main area I would like to focus is on the field work. So especially, when you observe, interview, and especially and then recording. So what do you mean by the field work or field study? You have to get the information from through the field work, kind of a naturally occurring situation. So you're doing a lot of work in the area of field work. The standard tool for field work in social linguistics is, as we all know, that is what you call by the social linguistic interview. So social linguistic interview is the main standard tool for any type of field work in social linguistics. So this method was developed and elaborated by William Labov through a number of projects. If you look at the William Labov's landmark studies, set the standard for variation in social linguistic field work, especially Labov's work on the New York City and his later work laid the foundation for the methods we use today. But there are so many other input as well for social linguistic field work. And what is interesting is social linguistic interviews are highly variable and depend on the personality and the both interviewer and the interviewee, especially how they interact with each other. So social interviews are, can you go back to please the earlier slide, please again, earlier slide, please. Yeah. And so how do you conduct an interview? So these are the questions or the concerns we have to consider, especially looking at research methods, especially in the social linguistic method. And what is important is how to encourage naturalistic speech in a social linguistic interview. So to bringing kind of natural day-to-day language for a linguistic interview. And how do you talk to your target audience? How do you talk to your target audience? And other interview techniques like informal, or whether it is going to be a natural. So there are so many areas if you are interested in kind of linguistic research in the area of social linguistics. Yeah, please next. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. And one of the main methodological approach in qualitative research that is mainly the ethnographic one. So ethnographic approach is very important as a component of any research studying language in its social context. If you look at the language from a socio-linguistic perspective, so linguistic ethnography is one of the main methodological approach, and it is now used by many other scholars in other disciplines, including applied linguistics, even apart from social linguistics. And fieldwork is at the heart of ethnography, and collecting data through field notes and keeping field notes, participant observation, and informant interviews. So ethnographic work is very important, especially for doing kind of a social linguistic research as from a studying language in its social context. Yeah. Next, yeah. And I would like to focus on another area, that is the written surveys. And in the area of research methods in social linguistics, written surveys and questionnaires. And so questionnaires allow researchers to collect relatively a kind of a large amount of data quickly. For example, we look at from a demographic data, from a language sample. So if you like, from different backgrounds. So questionnaires allow research to collect kind of a large number of data very quickly. And also questionnaires and written surveys allow to obtain statistically analyzable data especially about language attitudes, language beliefs, behaviors, for example, about say purity of language, about the correctness of language, like various attitudes about language we have, so about correctness, purity of language. So these are very important to use various questionnaires at the same time, doing a survey of, say, about the common errors in language usage. Questionnaires are also relatively cost effective, can be used in a variety of contexts. So this is again a kind of cost effective, can be used in a variety. Now, for example, especially using electronic media. So a situation like pandemic, not in a position to do any kind of field work now, especially even in our context as well. So what are the other methods in a challenging time like this? So using questionnaires and other things, written surveys, and also written surveys and questionnaires can be used for a variety of social linguistic problems, looking at various things. As I mentioned, there are so many problems that we can use questionnaires. For example, I've noted down few examples here. Questionnaire-based research in the area of social language surveys. Now, for example, for a country, for researchers in India, especially if you like for Odisha, so language surveys. I don't know about the current surveys doing, and also the Indian languages, and especially the main languages, and also the regional variation surveys. I don't know how many surveys have been conducted in your area, especially in Odisha, and regional variation surveys, and surveys of language use for various other purposes. And also we can use questionnaire-based research for testing or to get some information about language attitude and perception studies and so on. So, and at the same time, we have to think about these questions now, how to develop a questionnaire. So we can't, so that you need some training. So you need to get some advice from your lecturers or from your seniors. So how to develop a questionnaire, how to write good questions in a questionnaire, how to structure a questionnaire, how to test a questionnaire, how to administer the questionnaire. So this is important, especially to how to develop a professional looking kind of a well-structured questionnaire in an attractive design. So it depends on that, especially working on a questionnaire, you have to think all about these areas. And Another area that this is what I need to, will be not discuss much in the area of social linguistics still. This is, I would like to mention these two as well. The data collection methods in two new areas of social linguistic research, that is computer mediated communication, CMC. For example, now most of even my students, they want to do some lot of research, social linguistic research based on digital text, or the what you call the digital humanities now. The text-based interpersonal communication via digital media, including emails, texting, WhatsApp, as well as social networking sites and discussion forums, Facebook call. So these are the new methods of now recent topics. If you look at in some universities, maybe in India as well, there are so many areas that provide a scope for data collection methods, especially in computer-mediated communication, CMC, text-based interpersonal communication via digital media, email, texting. And there's another important area, that is the linguistic landscapes, what you call LL, language usage in public space, particularly on commercial offices. Now, if you look at the slide, the picture that I have pasted, this is from a metro train in Singapore. It's in English and also in Mandarin, and it's also in Tamil and Malay. So it's all in 4 languages. So if you looking at the kind of linguistic landscape and language usage in public space, in boards, and especially if you look at in a place like country like India, the language usage in public space, especially commercial and official science, and especially look at the graphical identity. It also matters. Graphical identity, use of different scripts now. So both the computer-mediated communication and linguistic landscape research face at the same time ethical issues related to the tension between privacy and the publicness. So we are using some of these as both. And the other area that I would like to focus here quickly is about the kind of corpus linguistic methods in social linguistics. So corpus linguistic methods, we know it's again a method. It's not a discipline. Corpus linguistics is taught as a discipline, but at the same time it's a method. So corpus linguistics is a method of analysis that can be used for almost any form of linguistic inquiry, not only for social linguistics, but at the same time, especially the scholars from when I did my master's at Lancaster, like Paul Baker and Tony McHenry, they were the kind of key figures in the corpus linguistics at Lancaster University in UK. And they examine large amounts of naturally occurring language data using computer software to help them to identify unexpected patterns or confirm their hypothesis. So it is very easy to examine large amount of data, because this is not manually, this is electronically through the purpose of by electronic corpus. So one benefit of using a corpus, a linguistic electronic corpus, is that it helps us to make claims that based on actual language use. So especially a kind of a newspaper language, or maybe there are 2 types of corpus. If it is a written corpora or spoken corpora. So if it is spoken or written, but both based on the actual language use and based on a lot of language use. So the number of the data, the lot of language use, and so this is also connected with the corpus size, or when you come to the social linguistics, the sample size. The sample size important because how many speakers are required for a viable study. So these are questions that we have to ask. The amount of data you collect and analyze depends on the parameters of the project. So we know the amount of data and the parameters of your project. And then the size of the sample must be balanced with available time. Now, this happens now, for example, if it is a final year dissertation at the university, or whether it is a master's or a PhD. So its sample size has an impact on your work, on the research project. So, and with the available time and the resources. And the more participants interview, the better. And what is important is we have to keep in mind that all projects are limited in terms of time and resources. So this is an important area we do in social linguistic research, especially looking at methods, the number of participants. And also there are several methods for selecting participants for social linguistic research. So there are so many different methods you can do, and especially with the participants. And when you come to the even in the sampling, there are two main approaches. We know that is one, is it common? Random sampling, that's choosing names for addresses, for example, addresses from sources like telephone directory or electoral list, that's random, and or judgment sample, the most common method for both methodological and pragmatic reasons. So these samples target participants that meet the predetermined criteria of the study, such as relevant social categories and so on. So there are two types, the random sampling and the judgment, right? So so I will answer the questions when we come to the question time. So at the same time, in social linguistics research, there are another important area, that is the what you call by the ethical side. You move on to the next slide. Ethical issues. So whenever research involves human beings, and especially in the area of especially social linguistics, ethical issues come into play. So whenever research work, especially in a linguistic field work, ethical issues come into play, and it is critically important to protect the anonymity of our participants, especially in a linguistic field work, or also from the especially with the participatory observations. And at the same time, you have to obey, or you have to think about the fieldwork ethics. So fieldwork involves not just getting the data, right? Especially if your work associated with, especially with children, or with some of your maybe your workers. So fieldwork involves not just getting the data, but getting it ethically, without violating local customs, traditions, especially places like in our South Asian context, especially in South Asia, where there is India, Sri Lanka, or in neighboring countries, especially we have some kind of culturally sensitive issues. So these we have to consider in social linguistic fieldwork and field study. And so what happens is, just go back, please. Yes, can you please move on to the earlier one, please? Again, yeah. So to safeguard the kind of cultural issues and local customs, and at the same time, you have to think about the various institutions require an ethics review of some sort. So ethics review committee. When in my own university, we have an ethics review committee for various research, either through a department or a faculty, or maybe as a separate university office. Yeah. Finally, but I'm trying to conclude my presentation now. There are a few practical tips. So first thing is to find develop a research question and make arguments. So your methods and research question. There is a link between your research question and your research method. So and also at the beginning, if you are doing research in social linguistics, you must have some knowledge of the nature of the data when planning the research at the planning stage, right? So you need some knowledge of the nature of what type of data that I'm looking. And you have to these are the some kind of practical tips that I can give you. The kind of a literature review is also helpful when considering methodology. So I look at various methodologies adopted by early scholars, and these methodologies can guide you toward methods that are most appropriate to your project. So this is very important to look at the methods for your work. And the choice of method can influence the return rate. So this is very important. So the choice of method has impact on the return rate and can limit the population to a particular type of respondent. So this is the method and the response. And also try to encourage always, especially in a social linguistic interview, try to encourage naturalistic speech. So this is otherwise your data needs some other kind of not naturalistic speech, but it's more kind of a more not in terms of natural speech. Finally, but there are many works done on final my site. The bibliography. If you look at, if you move on to the next slide, I can share this with you. And please, So there are so many works, but I would like to recommend to read, especially the work by Holmes and Hassan, Janet Holmes, a famous social linguist, and Hassan, Research Methods in Social Linguistics, and also the work by, especially Analyzing Social Linguistic Variation by Tagliamonte, Sally, and there are so many other works by other scholars. Final, thank you. Can you go to the last slide? Last slide, please. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay well, stay sane, and my best wishes from Colombo, Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. I have a few questions in the chat box. I will say, is there anything, any moderator here? Yes.
Yeah, sir. Dr. Sahel has some connection problem. He will join now and he will moderate the session. In the meantime, let me thank you first. So, sir, I'm very thankful to our honorable speaker, Professor Sandagomi, sir, and I'm really grateful for your kind presence in today's webinar and for agreeing to deliver a talk in this event. I'm really grateful to you, sir, and I'm quite sure that the valuable knowledge on research methods shared by you will definitely help the researchers in linguistics to perform their research work successfully. So we can take some questions now.
There are some in the chat box. I have some few, but there are areas that I can answer. But language is social artifact. Therefore, it should be approached in social context. I agree. That's true. I agree that current research is socially oriented. So research into linguistics in India should shift from language structure to language in social context. So this is interesting. But I agree that current research, but I don't know much about what's happening in the last few years. So is there any I don't know whether anybody can, but I don't know about the Indian situation. So research into linguistics in India should shift from language structure to language in social context. Is it true? I don't know. But if you, Mr. M. Sultan, is it what you mean by it should shift from language structure to language social? There is dominance, kind of dominance in research in language structure there? Sultan? Yes. Okay. And the data, the next one, the data I think should determine and guide the method. Research, but not the reverse. The data I think should determine and guide the method. So this is again interesting. So firstly you look at method or the data. So first you look at the method or the data. Now this the chat box there is a kind of query. I think we should determine and guide the method and research, but not the reverse. So what is interest? There's again interest, and please enlighten on convergence phenomena between language and the dialect of that language via way. So this is again part of the variation in linguistics, but linguistic convergence is a main area in language contact. I would like to recommend to read more on language contact, especially by in the area of especially this Lily Campbell's work on historical linguistics by Lily Campbell. So there is one chapter on convergence as well, and dialect convergence is also a part of that, and may lead to simplification by there is a question from Sebasis, yes, whether I pronounce his name correctly. Dialect convergence may lead to simplification and reduction of intrasystematic, especially in quantitative and variation. However, there's a long query here, but if you can, somebody can ask it very quickly, I can answer.
Sir,
But if there are
so there is one question from Dimple Chaudhary. You can take her question. Can you see her question?
from where?
Dimple Chaudhary. Dimple Chaudhary. So she is asking, what are the statistical procedures you recommend for studying language, attitudes, beliefs, and behavior? So this is
So,
her question.
yeah, it's interesting. But language, attitudes, and behaviors, I would like to suggest more on a kind of questionnaire based kind of a one. And you look at the doing kind of surveys and questionnaires. This is the most important for language attitude. But language attitudes is like, what do you mean by, is it about purity or the correctness? What type of attitudes? But with the term attitude is also broad. Whether it is purity of language, whether it is the correctness of language. If the participant is here, you can elaborate on what you mean by attitude. Is it about good or bad language, right? Correctness or incorrectness. So it depends on the what type of attitudes that we are looking at.
Okay, I think the participants has got her answer.
Okay.
So there is another question, and I'm finding it quite interesting. So could you highlight your views on sociophonetics?
Highlight your views on sociophonetics.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is interesting because bringing the phonetics is more on kind of looking at the kind of natural language, and bringing the sociophonetics. There are so many, but I'm not an expert on sociophonetics area. But how it is used in various, even now, for example, the Labov's early works more on, especially about the New York study, is bringing the phonetics and the pronunciation and the socially kind of social context. So bringing phonetics to social context is very important, but less work has been done. But again, I'm not an expert on this area of sociophonetics. I'm sorry that I'm not in a position to answer that question, but there are so many work has been done on sociophonetics, right?
Yeah.
And
Sir,
could you please, there's another question, yeah. Could you please suggest any other software or test for analysis for? Yeah, if you look at the if you go to the works of Tony McHenry, and if you look at the corpus linguistics, there are so many softwares or tests for linguistic data like concordance and looking at the frequency. For example, frequency is important to look at. So it's all computer depend on the computer software in corpus linguistics. And there's another question, do I need to go for validity and reliability tests if I adapt a questionnaire from works that already published? Are validity and reliability tests mandatory? Do I need to go for a validity and reliability? So just to get validated means, but you can do a kind of a test one and do, but it depends on the time that you time available for you for a questionnaire from works, and better to get some advice from your professors or from your staff before you are implementing or before you are practicing the work, especially. So validity and reliability test mandatory, but it depends on the institution. If you are doing it for a master's or MPhil, yeah, that's all that I can say. But it depends according, yeah.
Yeah. Sir, I think there is no more question. Sir,
There's another, is frequency and percentage enough to analyze?
Okay.
Is frequency and percentage mainly, it is a corpus linguistic, if you are using kind of corpus linguistic method, frequency is there. So it's sometimes not enough, yeah. So thank you, Arpita, for inviting me. I hope I would like to, but this is not the best way to interact with scholars like people like you. And I would like to visit one day if everything goes well in future. And I wish you all the best for my friends in India, and especially from Odisha. This was, I said, my last visit was in 2015 for a Kalinga Lanka conference, and I wish you all the best. So maybe I might stay for few minutes and then I will leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once again, I would like to thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for accepting my invitation and for your presence, wonderful talks, question answer session. Thank you for everything, sir. And thank you for giving us time for your busy calendar. Thank you very much, sir. So
thank you very much.
Now we shall move on to the second presentation of today's webinar. I would request my colleague, Dr. Pallavi Kiran, to introduce our honorable speaker for the second presentation and lead the session. Over to you, Pallavi. I hope you are hearing me. Hello, just let me check. So, Pallavi, are you there? You can unmute yourself and speak. Hello? Hello? Yes, Pallavi. Over to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hope I'm audible now.
Yeah, you're audible. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second session. I see our next guest with us. Good afternoon, ma'am. She is Dr. Sanyal from IIT Delhi. We welcome you to our webinar on methods, tools, and techniques in current research. We are honored to have you with us. And, you know, as a linguist, we are looking forward to your session on the research methods in phonology. This seems very interesting. So, ma'am, before I, hand over the session to you, I would just like to introduce you to our audience to let them know about you and your work in linguistics. So Dr. Sanyal, after completing her MA in English, has earned her MPhil and PhD in linguistics from English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. Her research interests are in theoretical approaches to phonology and morphosyntax. Specifically, she uses the theoretical framework of optimality theory and harmonic grammar for analyzing phonological data, and distributive morphology and minimalism for the analysis of morphosyntactic aspects, which are realized through phonological processes in particular natural languages. A decade ago, she started her teaching career as an English faculty at the University of Hyderabad and then at the Central University of Karnataka. She was also instrumental in setting up the Language Learning Center at IIT Delhi that assists students from non-English medium background transition to an English dominant academic background. And this is very interesting, very I mean, delighted. We are very delighted to have you. I hand over the session to you, and we are looking forward to an enriching session.
Thank you, Pallavi. I am very happy to be here. Let's first check whether I can share the screen properly.
Yes.
So is my screen visible?
I'll just ask. Yes. Meanwhile, I'll just request my audience, all the participants, to put up their question in the chat box, which we'll take up later. Yes, Dr. Sanyal, that would be good, I guess, if we answer all the questions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
You can keep putting your questions on this. So first of all, I would like to start by thanking Arpita for the invite. I am delighted to be here today and back in my home state, by the way. Orissa is my home state. I hail from Orissa. So I'm born and brought up in Orissa, and I'm from Rourkela. So what I would be doing today is giving you a cartography, a mapping of the approaches to research that we use in phonology. So to jump right into the foray, so we'll start by asking it two questions over here, which are the fundamental research questions that we have. One is that we'll start with the question, what do some of the basic research questions in phonology look like? If you're a phonologist, what kind of questions do you use? And then we will progress to what kind of theoretical frame is suited for what kind of a question. What theory you use is going to be dependent upon the question that you're going to set. Now, keep in mind that right before me, there was a very interesting talk, and most of the field method techniques, the ethical techniques, and what was discussed in the previous talk is relevant here as well. I will not be repeating those things because those will carry over into the methods of data collection that you use. And that was brilliantly put forth and very clearly described by my preceding speaker, Professor Coperahewa. So I'll get into the questions. Sorry. So if you are looking at phonology, you begin with, there are two ways you can start by, in order to try to frame your research question, there are two different directions you can start with. So one is possibly you can focus on a language, or you can focus on a process or a phonological phenomena. So the approach would be slightly different if you start with a language or if you start with a phenomena. For example, we know that we are working in South Asia, and among the South Asian languages and the location where you people are in Odisha, you have we have a lot of languages there which are barely documented, right? So, and especially when it comes to phonology, we do have quite a bit of nice work on syntax of Odia. Professor B.N. Patnaik and others have worked on that. But when it comes to phonology, we have limited work that has happened in Odia when you compare it, and I'm talking about standard Odia. I'm not even talking about the Odia that is spoken in Ganjam, or the Odia that is spoken in Sambalpur, which is phonologically quite different from the Odia that is spoken in Bhubaneswar, Cuttack. So what we are talking about here is, there's a documentation, there's a description, there is a task ahead. Now, this is just talking about Odia, but we know that apart from Odia, there are many other languages that are spoken all around us, right? So, and There is a nice sketch of that Professor Pandey had done over a period of a couple of decades of hard work. Pramod Pandey had done in what you will find in the book Sound Patterns of Indic Languages. A number of languages of Odia, I'm saying Odisha, are contained over there. But these are at the sketch of the phonemic inventory. So what are the sounds in these languages? But phonology is not just about the sounds of the particular languages, right? We need to know these languages a lot better. So therefore, there is a lot of potential for work by approaching the question of phonology from the perspective of describing a particular language, right? Language descriptions. So that's an important task, especially because if I were to do, let's see, my mother tongue is Bangla. If I had to start today and say that, okay, I want to do a language description of Bangla, that would be not a very viable research project, because before me close to 200 people have done that, right? So it is not that I am going to do something or say something that somebody else has not observed before, right? So, and it is very well documented. But on the other hand, same with English, but if you are doing in a lesser known language, the chances are that language description is a very valid research project that you have. Now, within language description, there are two ways of getting into the language discussion. So one is that either you are a native speaker of that language, in which case you have a definite added advantage, because it is, you have the entire lexicon in your mind. You are looking for a pattern, and you are looking for a particular pattern of sounds that you want to see whether it occurs or doesn't occur. Within seconds, your mind will be able to give you an example, right? So there's a definite advantage, there's an intuition, there is a definite advantage of working if you are a native speaker of a language. Language description or working in phonology becomes that much easier. Nevertheless, you can also work on languages in which you are not a native speaker, right? So we as phonologists, I started out my research career by working on Chumli Au. I'm not a native speaker of Au. It is spoken in Nagaland, of course, right? So you can start out by working on data, right? But you'll have to really have informant who is, especially for phonology, because for phonology, not everything can be done through a questionnaire. So it's like a lot of patterns and testing out those patterns and testing out those intuitions. So you need to have like a very regular person who is a native speaker, to whom you have access and you can ask the questions, right? So even one would do, but you need a native speaker, right? Somebody to ask your questions to. But whichever way you start out with, the first step is to do a review of literature, right? So what are if there is absolutely no work in that language, there would be some work in the languages which are in the general family of languages, right? So get a sense of how these descriptions were done. Now, once you start out with looking at doing the description, there are 3 levels at which we can look at it. And I'm going to stick to these 3 levels. I'm not going to go into intonation. You'll see very clearly why I'm not expanding into intonation and sentences and utterance and discourse, because phonology is relevant in all those contexts as well. And I'll give you some references to look up probably, but because of the paucity of time, I need to finish this in 45 minutes. And that's why I'm not expanding a lot. So we will look at what we can see in the segmental level, then the string level, and then the lexical level. What do we mean by segmental? Segmental means each unit, right? So if you look at a digital meter, so like your speedometer or like your odometer in your car or bike, how much fuel is there? You have these digits over there, right, on top in front of you. So each unit in that digit. So a phonological string is also like that. So there's a sequence of letters, there's a sequence of objects that are there. Each unit over there is called a segment, right? So it is at the segmental level that you can chop and look. Your focus could be at the segmental level. Your focus could be at the string level, right? Where you're looking at the entire string that you have put together, that level. And or your focus could be at the lexical level. What makes a word, right? How do your questions could be at the level of when there are these continuous strings of sounds, how do we break those into words? How do we learn words? What are the kinds of cues, phonological cues are embedded in language that tell us that, okay, this is the beginning of the word, this is potentially the end of the word. Where are those cues located? So your questions could be on any of these levels. Now at the segmental level, you could have, we could look at the phonemic inventory, which is what I said in your sound patterns of Indic languages. You have the phonemic inventory of many South Asian languages are given. We could also look at it through acoustic properties, right? So as phonologists, we have two major tools of looking at acoustic properties. We use recordings, we do recordings, and we use either Pratt or we use Audacity. These are two softwares. Pratt is used a lot more common. These are free softwares, can be downloaded, can be used very easy and user-friendly, right? So we could look at it using either one of these. Now, when you look at phonemic inventory, the usual way of figuring out whether something is a phoneme or not in a language, whether it's an allophone or phoneme in a language, is the textbook way is to look at minimal pairs. Do they form minimal pairs? For example, Bani and Pani, right? Pani is water and Bani is speech, right? So you have Bani and Pani, so Ba and Pa are minimal pairs in Odia. So similarly, you have Gorom and Korom, right? So you have Ga and Ka are, so voicing makes a difference in Odia, and you have these as minimal pairs. So this is one way in which you can determine what's the phonemic inventory. So you make lists of these combinations, right? And you are, now notice that I didn't just randomly select any two different sounds to make a minimal pair. The sounds that, the examples that I gave right now, they are contrasting with respect to one property, voicing, right? So I have used something from somewhere else, which I will come to, a theoretical knowledge of something, right? In order to determine what kind of minimal pairs am I going to look at in the data. I will come to what kind of theory is going to give me those properties that I can look for in the minimal pairs, whether that property is present or not, in the, when I approach the second question, what are the theories that are matching with these, right? The second way, if you look at phonology dissertations across Indian universities, right? This is especially true of Indian universities. You will not find this in UCLA dissertations, in Stanford dissertations, in MIT dissertations, in phonology. You will not find this. It is especially true of dissertations written in India. The first chapter will have phonemic inventory, and the sounds that are listed in the phonemic inventory, people would have listed those in initial, medial, and final position. Does this sound occur in the initial position of words, medial position, or medially somewhere in the word, or finally somewhere in the word? Now you can see that I have drawn a line over there, right? So the reason is because I will very shortly come back to this. There's a better way of doing this. So when we are saying something is in the initial position, we are not necessarily saying initial of what, right? Initial of a syllable, initial of a word. So why are we even taking word as a unit and saying that initial position of a word matters, right? So there are fundamental questions as to what exactly are you achieving with this description of initial, medial, and final. Medial can be, is it preceded by a consonant? Is it preceded and is it flanked by vowels? What kind of sounds are in the neighborhood in its consecutive positions? That's what is going to determine a lot of properties that it has. So whether something comes after a nasal or whether something comes after a vowel or not, both might be in a medial position, but both would be quite different, the medial position. So listing sounds which are just coming in the middle of words is not necessarily giving a deep enough description which is useful for a phonological analysis. So I'll come to how we can do this a lot better, right? More detailed. So now we come to acoustic properties. The with respect to acoustic properties, the common things that we look at is the spatial distribution of sounds. So whether you can tell from a symbol from that acoustic data, right? So what is the distribution of, for example, vowels in a particular language, right? So for example, the language that you speak, Odia, has, many of you speak, sorry, not, I shouldn't say you speak, many of us speak, I do speak, so has a 5 vowel repertoire, right? So, but a 6 vowel repertoire, not a 5 vowel repertoire. But of these vowels, you can have nasalized vowels, you can have non-nasalized vowels, but we don't have vowel length distinction. We don't have a schwa, right? So, and all our vowels are peripheral vowels, right? They are all in the periphery of our space. So what kind of property does this what does it tell us about the phonology of the language, or a language that decides not to use vowel length distinction as opposed to a language which uses vowel length distinction? So there are plenty of languages, Indo-Aryan languages, which use, and Dravidian languages, the context in which we are located, we are flanked by Indo-Aryan and Dravidian languages. Most of them have vowel length distinction. Most of them show prominence through vowel reduction in unstressed position and various other ways, right? We do not do that at all. So how is our phonology of these languages structured differently from the phonology of these languages? Why do we have these peripheral spatial organizations? So there are very interesting questions that lurk over here in the acoustic property of what we have by looking into the quality of the sounds that we are producing. Similarly, with respect to the property of other properties of sounds, you can figure out gemination, you can figure out what kind of stops do we have, VOT, and other kinds of acoustic properties, which are going to tell you a lot more about the segmental properties and why something is happening, right? So you have literature that tells you that a certain property of, so I'll give you a very broadish example over here to explain what I mean. So you can get, you understand the distinction between voiced and voiceless sounds, right? So that now in phonetics, you can actually in articulation get voiceless plosives in two different ways. One way of getting a voiceless plosive is to open your glottis, right? Wide open. If your glottis is open, you cannot have the vibration and there will be no voicing. But that takes some muscle control and that takes some muscular effort, right? So that is active devoicing. Now, as opposed to that, you can also do nothing. So if you have a stop and you just do not do anything to maintain voicing, since the air pressure is going to increase over above the glottis over a period of time, the air will stop flowing and voicing will stop. So there will be a dampening of voicing. So acoustically, you will see that there was voicing happening and the voicing dampened over there, right? So that's also a kind of devoicing, but it is not an active devoicing, it's a passive devoicing. Now, whether a language has active devoicing or passive devoicing can be a determinate factor in predicting whether it will have voicing assimilation or not have voicing assimilation. What kind of phonological processes it is going to have. So there could be properties, acoustic properties, that are able to predict the direction in which phonological processes are working. So this is another small focus area that one can have in your research, right? Then, once we come to the string over here, at the string level, we can look at positions in the string. So in order to look at positions in the string, we'll have to determine various positions. Or we can look at it with respect to phonotactic restrictions. Who can come next to each other? That's your phonotactic restriction. So your prosodic positions in the string, you can have your onset, coda. These are terms that are used to describe a syllable, right? Your onset is the consonant that precedes the nucleus or the vowel in a syllable. Coda is the consonant that follows, right, within the same syllable. So whether something can come in the onset position, whether something can come in the coda position. Now keep in mind here that we were talking about initial positions earlier over here. Now, with respect to onset is an initial position, but that initial position can be we use this double hash in order to denote a word boundary, right? So it can be a word initial onset or it can be a non-word initial onset inside the syllable also. So you can have distributional distinctions. So if something is present in a word initial position, but also present in non-initial onset positions, then you can say that this is licensed in an onset position. But if something is present in word initial position, but doesn't occur in the medial onsets, right? So then you cannot say that that is a case of it is licensed in an onset position. Right? So, for example, in English, the sound her, you have words beginning with her, right? But you do not find her in the regular non-loan English words. You do not find her coming in the middle onsets. So in medial onsets, you do not find anywhere her coming in. So neither do you find it in the final position. So you cannot really say that the sound her, describe it as her occurs in the onset position because it's only the word initial onset. So this is what I meant, that we can do a step better. We can describe things in more detail. The same thing is true with coda as well, right? So there is coda will be in the word final position. If you have a consonant, that will be a coda position. But not all codas are word final, right? So you can also have in between positions. So there is a possibility to we can imagine that there can be a language which allows a particular sound in the word final coda position, but doesn't allow it anywhere in the in between position, right? Even if you have codas in between, you will not get. Another example is the very common textbook example of your all these European languages, Polish, German, Austrian, they all have this word final devoicing, right? So where the voiced plosives change to voiceless in word final position. But in medial coda positions, they do not. You can find voiced sounds. So you can find these voiced obstruents present over there. So this is distinction. So when we are describing a language, this taking this apart, unpacking this helps, right? So if we are going to do that. The same is the case with the location of the stress. How is where is the stress located? How do we determine whether there is a stress or not, right? So this becomes a pretty much difficult task for us who speak languages from the East Indian belt, right? Because we do not overtly tend to show markers of stress, like we do not do this, we do not have schwa, we do not do vowel length variation, we do not do a whole bunch of other syllabic adjustments that will give a clue as to where is the stress, right? So for example, Punjabi and all are such nice languages, they will put the tone on the stress syllable, right? So there you go, you have the high low tone, there you go, you have the low high tone, you know where the stress is, right? Not so clear for us, right? So this is Bangla is slightly better than Odia in that sense, because in marking there is a phonological cue to stress, because we allow the vowel o, the minus ATR vowel o, only in stressed positions. So the lotus, the word which would be komal in Odia, will be komol in Bangla. The second one will be the O. So the unstressed position will get a O, the O is licensed only in the stressed position. So this is something that gives you a clue to where stress is located. There might be phonological processes that will give you a clue. Then we go ahead and look at the co-occurrence restrictions. What phonotactic restrictions basically means, another way of saying what a phonotactic restriction is co-occurrence restrictions, right? So edge is this, what comes next to an edge, right? Nasal obstruent. So anywhere where there is a nasal, and especially in medial location, when there is a NC situation, a nasal followed by an obstruent. Why is this a problem location to look at? Because both the nasal is also a stop. Nasal is also an oral stop, right? You have your velum, you have your nasal chamber open for resonance. Now, when you have two of these coming together, the nasal is voiced, the obstruent will tend to get voiced ideally, because you have the same manner of articulation, both are stops, right? Now in the but on the other hand, the nasal will tend to place assimilate with the obstruent that is following, right? So if you have a labial obstruent, the nasal will tend to become a labial nasal, and so on. So this is a typical case where you look for. So there are specific typical cases that you look for when you're describing a language. What happens in this context? How do you discover whether there is a process that is there, right? So you would look at a sandhi context, for example. You take a word that ends in a nasal, you take a suffix that begins with an obstruent. When you join them together, do you see any sandhi happening? Do you not see any sandhi happening, right? Vowel hiatus, very common context, which is that what happens to a context where two vowels end up coming next to each other. This is usually a derived context. Your base ends in a vowel and your suffix begins with a vowel. What do you do over there? Do you delete that vowel? Do you insert a glide somewhere in between? If you insert a glide, which glide do you insert, right? For example, in Hindi, systematically, the glide that is in, if there are two vowels that are coming next to each other, Hindi systematically uh, inserts the vowel ya, right? Like your diya, gaya kind of thing. Now you notice another language, for example, Bangla, is in this with flanked by the exact same vowels, a and a, can insert two different glides altogether depending upon the context, right? So you can have a word to give in the verb deva, right? Deva. There's the labial glide that is coming, right? You can also have another context, the palatal glide, right? So, and it is not that the palatal glide is not allowed in the language. So both glides are inserted, but they are in different kinds of morphophonological contexts. The different glides are inserted. So vowel hiatus is a rich area if you are, and easy to find, because you take the bases which end in vowels, different kinds of vowels. You take the suffixes that are beginning with different kinds of vowels, put them together, see what happens, right? And describe what happens. Then you have the scenario of interfeature. So if on your string, on two sides of the sound segment that you're looking at, you have the sounds sharing the same feature, what happens to that feature in the medial one, the sound that is sandwiched between them, right? So for example, if you have two voiced sonorants on two sides and a voiceless obstruent in the middle, right? Would you voice that, right? In that context, common, very familiar example for all of us would be the case of a word like simple, right? The first syllable is sim, ends in a ma, which is a sonorant, voiced, therefore. The second syllable, right, has a per. Now, depending upon whether you pronounce the schwa or not, either way, whether you have la following the per or schwa following the per, doesn't matter. Either way, you have a sonorant following it. So this per, which is a minor sonorant, a non-sonorant, an obstruent, and a voiceless one, will it get voiced or not, right? So for many of our languages do not do this voicing. So if it doesn't, then we can say the word simple very easily, right? But if our language does this intervocalic or sonorant voicing, then it will become simbly, right? So it would become a b. So that's the sorry. The next one that I have over here is a obstruent sequence. So just like your nasal obstruent sequence, you can also have an obstruent sequence. And when you have an obstruent sequence, they have something in common with each other. They have the same manner of articulation. Now, they might not want to be different in place of articulation, different in voicing, right? So things that are similar but not the same are highly dispreferred across in phonological contexts. So things that are different are fine, things that are same are fine. So if the two obstruents are exactly the same, then it is fine. You have a geminate. That's actually nice. But if you have two things that are similar but not the same, That's a problem situation. That's the situation where there would be a change happening of something. So you look for contexts where this is happening, especially in Sandhi context example. So if you have a suffix that begins with a plosive, right, begins with an obstruent, you are going to check what happens when you put other kinds of obstruents, base with other kinds of obstruents, when you stick them together, what kind of, whether there is a sandhi that happens or not, what kind of process is happening. So that's an easy way of looking at things. And then there is the Lyman's law kind of OCP, obligatory contour principle kind of thing to look at, which is that you do not want two elements, two segments, which have the same properties, you do not, or which have the same similar properties, many a time you do not want them within the same string, same domain, right? So if you have one aspirate, you do not want another aspirate. So if you have one la, you don't want another la, you will dissimulate it into something, into a ra or something. So there is a dissimilatory tendency that happens in things that are not immediately consecutively adjacent to each other, which are separated out within the string, but within that same domain, within the same string, if you have sounds which are similar, it's going to cause, basically, it's going to cause a slip of tongue. You know, you're going to get a slip of tongue in trying to do that. So those kinds of structures are also avoided many a time. Systematic, you'll find systematic gaps over here, right? So this is one way of looking at that. Moving on, right? So this, we got done with the string, we got done with the segments. Now we look at the lexical characteristics. So lexical means that there could be processes that could be specific to a particular morpheme, right? That is, the causative morpheme is showing this, or the past tense morpheme is showing a particular kind of process, right? So there could be a specific morphosyntactic morpheme that is showing a particular kind of process. For example, in case of Hindi, you will find, I'm giving you top of the head examples, right? So in case of Hindi, you will find that you have a change in the vowel, a vowel reduction that you have between, let's say, dekhna and dikhna, right? Now the characteristic that is happening over there is there's a transitivity alternation. So there's a morphosyntactic characteristic, but it's expressed in terms of phonological reduction in the vowel. So there could be a specific morpheme or morphosyntactic process that is linked to it, or it could be a generalized phenomena of the derived versus underived domain. So certain things happen in the derived domain only, but not in the underived domain, right? We will look at theories that capture this idea. So the first thing that we find over here is under application. You thought about, you found the process, but then you land up and find that the process is not applying, right? It has the context, but it is not applying, right? So sometimes, so there's literature that talks about blocking in derived context, blocking in underived context. So this derived underived context could end up blocking a process from happening, right? Under application of that. Then you can have over application. So this is the very common case that you might have, if you have studied any introductory course in phonology, you would have heard of the term opacity in rule ordering. So opacity is basically what's your over application. So you had the process and it so you are expecting that the context is not there, but the process is there. So it's as if there were ghosts at the derivational stage which have disappeared somehow. So whatever motivated the process has disappeared, but the process is still there. So a common example that I can give you is in case of, for a long time in a lot of literature on Bangla vowel harmony, there was this idea that there is this, it's regularly noticed that the high vowel triggers harmony in Bangla, raising harmony. Now, in many verb roots, the high vowel is not present at all in the affix. It just disappeared, right? There's a sound change and it has disappeared, but the root vowel continues to harmonize with the ghost vowel. The vowel is no longer there, but it is. So there's an over application of something that is happening, right? So those kinds of processes would be your cases of over application, right? So in Bangla case that I gave has been reanalyzed. It's no longer like there's a ghost there lurking behind, right? So then there is this notion of paradigm uniformity. This is a concept that was proposed earlier by Donka Stereode. But the notion here is that you want there to be as little allomorphy as possible. So you want there to be a meaning to phonological form, what it stands for, affix to its phonological form. You want there to be a one-to-one correspondence, not a one-to-many correspondence. So you want to reduce down, clamp down, you want to have a regular paradigm rather than having an irregular paradigm. The idea is there is a force in the grammatical system in order to regularize the grammatical paradigm, right? To make it more and more regular. So this is called paradigm uniformity, to maintain uniformity across the derivational inflectional paradigms. Optimal paradigms. This is again a lexical, morphological related concept that was proposed by John McCarthy. The idea that he is talking about is this observation that in many languages, you will find that if you look at the affixes, right, you will find that they are either, there's some kind of a restriction in their phonological shape. So in some languages, you will find that all the affixes, suffixes are beginning with consonants, right? So if you begin all suffixes with consonants, you avoid vowel hiatus automatically, because when you attach, then you are never going to end up with a situation of vowel hiatus, right? So in some languages, you will find that the bound roots, for example, verb roots, have a definitive shape. For example, 99% of verb roots in Bangla and many in Hindi as well, majority of them are CVC, right? So you have a particular pattern to that, those verb roots, so that, and that ensures that you will have minimal phonological adjustments that are required. So this, looking at the shape of these lexical sets, is the phonological shape of these lexical sets is called optimal paradigms, looking at how it is optimized in a particular language, right? So one can do that as a very interesting project. And of course,
Sorry, ma'am, for the interruption. I just would like you to check on the time. And
yeah.
if you can just take us to the conclusion, and we can just take the questions that we have. It's already
Okay,
more
how
than
much
45
time
minutes.
did I use? Sorry.
We have already crossed the time.
Oh, sorry.
So it's okay. I mean, you can continue, but I mean, just to keep it short so that we can
okay, I'll
have
just very quickly, I'll
yes,
just move, right?
yes, yes,
all
ma'am.
right. Okay,
It is
so
very
I'll
interesting to listen
just,
to you, but you know, it's
yeah.
we
There's
have
one more,
time.
there's definitely. So
Okay.
I'll just very quickly move this, that if you're looking at the phenomena from a perspective of phenomena in language, not in the from the perspective of looking at a language, but looking at phonological phenomena, then you will have all these processes that you can look at, right? So I'll move quickly to the second question, which will move very quickly actually. So if you are looking at things from the perspective of acoustics, these are some of the theories that will come in handy for you. Natural phonology, phonologically grounded phonology, they look at from the perspective. I have given the references. There are many readings that you can look at. Similarly, from the perspective of the phoneme inventory, if you're looking at distinctive feature theory, substance-free phonology, dependency phonology, these are theoretical frameworks that you can use. And there's a lot of references that you can look at. This is just a very small set of references that I am showing over here. If you are looking at it from the position of prosodic positions, you can use syllable theory, prosodic hierarchy, metrical theory, government phonology. All of them are looking at the string from the position of various positions, right? And there's a lot of work and references involved over here. And from the phonotactic restrictions, most common way to look at it is lexical phonology and autosegmental phonology. Now, if you are looking at it from the perspective of diachronic or areal changes, lexical variation, exceptions, and so on, you can look through evolutionary phonology, learning algorithms, all of them would be looking at it. And if you are not looking through a language, but if you are interested in a particular phenomena, then the most conducive way of looking at it is through constraint-based paradigms, because constraint-based paradigms like your standard optimality theory, harmonic serialism, stratal optimality theory, harmonic grammar, these are going to look at it are going to ask the question, why did this process happen? It's not going to describe the process, it is going to say why the process happened, right? And references. Yeah, I'm done.
Wonderful, ma'am. We had this wonderful technical session, and thank you for taking us deep into phonology. This was very enriching session, but we are sorry we have time constraint as per the schedule. But we would love to, take the presentation and share it with our audience as it is being requested. Uh, we have one question from Haysam Kenny Devi. If I just read it for you, it says that
okay, I can read the question. How to select possible candidates for applying optimality theory?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the how to select possible candidates for so there are now optimality theory can be applied, can be merged with any of the other theories that I told you, which are talking about, which are more representational theories. Now optimality theory is basically a comparison algorithm, which is going to look at what are the biases and how much which bias is prioritized over which other bias. Now, how you characterize each one of those biases is going to be, your constraints are going to be determined by either your autosegmental phonology or some metrical phonology or some other theory which you have in the first part, in your descriptive framework is going to do that. Now, the candidates term we use in optimality theory is for, there is an input and then you have output candidates. So I'm not sure what you mean by candidates over here, but if you mean how to select possible candidates, now there are usually theoretically you should be able to generate infinite candidates, right? All the possible candidates. But there are specific approaches to optimality theory. For example, harmonic serialism of John McCarthy, where you do it in various steps, and you control the generator. So you have just so at each step you can generate candidates which can have only maximally one faithfulness violation. So you have various models inside of that in order to control the candidates generation. So those are also possible.
Okay, ma'am, we have another question by Joanna, which is how do we decide the hierarchy when applying OT?
Right. How do we decide the hierarchy when applying OT? So the uh, first step is to presume that nobody have a quasi table, which is where you do not rank anybody with respect to anybody, right? You presume that everybody is at the same level, right? And I'm going to rank somebody higher than someone if and only if it makes a difference, right? So leaving everybody else unranked. So therefore, so start with everybody at the 0 level, and then once you've computed the violations, then see which are the crucial violations and who needs to be ranked higher than whom, and then which are the, so that's how you get your ranking logic one by one through the quasi table. So you have to first make a quasi table, all your constraints that you think are relevant and all the relevant candidates, and computing the violations.
Okay. Ma'am, we have another question from Madhushri Mukherjee.
Yeah.
She's asking, is obstruent sequence and OCP connected?
OCP is a generalized, Madhushri, OCP is a generalized concept that you do not like two of the same type within the same domain. Now that can appear, it's a dissimilatory constraint, right? Or it's a dissimilatory principle. So you can have that applying to obstruents. You can have that applying to a set of liquids. You can have that. So there are languages where it applies to set of liquids. There are languages where it applies to a set of, with respect to place of articulation. It can apply to vowels, right? You do not want of the same type multiple ones. So it can vary on what segments it applies and what properties it applies. It's a generalized principle.
Okay. Ma'am, apart from the questions, we have compliments for you as well.
Yeah,
Lokeshwari
thank you.
Khurana, she is stating, I was afraid at phonology, but you showed an interesting side of the subject. If I met you earlier in my student days, definitely I would have become a phonology student. Okay. And then I guess, ma'am, that's all from the question side. Uh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are honored to have you. Yes, it's over to Arpita.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Pallavi, for extending your helping hand to moderate this session. You have done it very nicely. And my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Paroma ma'am for your kind presence in our event and for your time and for this very informative. I must say that this is a very theoretical insights into the aspects of research in phonology. And I'm also working in phonology, so it would also help me in a significant way. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
I also thank Dr. Sanyal. I was by the side, I was watching those slides. This is quite good. It looks very formal, and I like the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now we shall move on to the final presentation of today's webinar. Before I call upon the speaker for the current presentation to come up, I would love to briefly introduce her. Dr. Anindita Sahoo is an assistant professor in Department of Humanities and Social Science at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. She obtained her PhD in linguistics from the IIT Delhi, India. Her PhD thesis analyzes passive constructions in South Asian languages such as Odia, Khadiya, and Malayalam. Her primary research interests are in linguistics typology, syntax, and pragmatics. Her recent work focused on the typology, grammaticalization of voice, and copular constructions. For today's event, the title of our talk is Linguistic Research interactional, diachronic, and typological approaches. So over to you, Anindita.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Arpita. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I see Paroma here. Hi, Paroma. Very happy to listen to you after a long time. And
Hi. So it's very nice to see you.
Yeah, and a warm afternoon wish to Professor Sandagomi. We'll talk about our other work later. Thank you for being here. And then it's indeed a pleasure to meet colleagues from KIIT, and it's popularly known as KIIT, right? So I'm really happy to be here. And considering the talk is about research methods. And initially, I remember Arpita, when she contacted me, she wanted to put some writing component to it. But then I thought probably it will be nice if we can have more methodological discussions, and then considering each of us are working on different fields, to have everything together from 3 different speakers. That's going to be wonderful. I had a class, so I couldn't really attend Professor Sandagomi's talk. I'm really sorry about it, but Paroma, it's really nice to to hear you once again. I'll start from, okay, I have to share the slides. Okay, give me a minute. Oh, okay, where is that? Where is the, I'm more familiar with Google Meet. That's what we are using. How would I go to the slideshow?
You can see that now in the share screen.
That's what I'm looking for.
Click there. I'm sending you a picture.
Yeah, okay. I think you have to allow me. It's written only host.
Yeah. Now you can try.
Okay, all right, let me see. It doesn't actually allow me to share my screen. It's written, okay, now it's all participants.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here it is.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, all right, thank you. I started my research from syntactic typology, and now I'm trying to expand it a little more. Like, I'm trying to move beyond syntactic typology, and I'm trying to understand how the researchers in interactional framework, typological framework, and diachronic framework are trying to approach the questions or the interesting issues that linguistics has got to offer. Since we have audience from different fields, it's not exclusively linguistic, so I'll just quickly go through a couple of generic points about research, and then I'll move to the kind of work that I'm doing for the moment. As I have written on the very first point, you can see research is kind of very intuitively done work. And it's definitely not an accidental discovery. Rather, it's a process. One has to follow it. One has to delve deep into it. And you have to find out the answer that you're searching for through your work. And a couple of points that I would like to highlight. So when we talk about research, especially in the kind of work like academic field that we are in, the primary aim is to find a solution to a problem. And that problem could be the research question, or you can call it a hypothesis or something else if other disciplines are going to call this particular thing. I'm not really much familiar with the other discipline research, but at least in the broad area of social sciences, either you hypothesize something, or you're trying to get an answer to a question that you have in hand. And through your work, you are supposed to provide certain set of information that will guide the future researchers. So when you write a thesis, or when you definitely did some work, then after that it has remained, like it will it should give a scope to another generation of researchers and the set of researchers to carry or to take it's like to start their journey from there. So you have to make it available for others, so that the current, like the future researchers or the practitioners, they will take the right steps from there. And eventually, whatever work you are doing, research is not a haphazard work, and you have to plan things meticulously, and you have to think about the research question carefully. Then you have to find out what sort of data that you need, how to collect the data, whether the data collection process has been a kind of does it have certain kind of relevance or not, and what sort of data that you collect, that also matters, no matter whether you are into linguistics research or beyond that. And as far as the objectives are concerned, there are multiple kinds of research that academic disciplines offer. If you're trying to explore new things, we call it exploratory or formulative research. Those who are the new faculty over here, if the good institutes in the country, they do support the new faculty or the young faculty to sort of go for the exploratory research. So they would give you some kind of seed money or the initiation grant, and then you can explore the area of interest that you want to sort of do more work with. And then that would be formulative or exploratory kind of work. Then the second category is the descriptive research, when you're trying to describe the characteristics of the particular individual or situation or a group. So that's going to be descriptive. Then diagnostic research, where you're trying to find out what is the frequency of occurrence of a particular phenomenon and what are the other associated things related to this research. So that's going to be the kind of the diagnostic research. And eventually, which I generally don't do, but then a lot of other social science researchers, they are into it, that is the testing research. So in this case, you have to draw hypothesis, and your hypothesis has to be borne out. You have to find out whether you could satisfactorily prove it, or it could not be refuted. So something like that. So that has to be done through the testing research. I generally don't do that, so I don't have much expertise on it. But a lot of economics, like statistics, economics, social studies people, they are into the testing research kind of thing. And no matter whatever research you are in, whether it is sciences, social sciences, or within social sciences, if you're talking about language and linguistics, you can find out information from different sources. It could be your own reading, it could be your own academic experience. Even your real life experience is going to help you to find out a question. Field experience, if you are a zealous kind of a field linguist, or you're trying to understand the social phenomenon, language and its connection with the society, then obviously the field experience is going to help you out to find the right kind of question. Otherwise, also there are certain other phenomenon by which you can come up with new questions. Either you discuss with the peer group, or you consult with people, you do the brainstorming, and eventually it's your intuition that's going to help you to come up with the question that you want to address through your research. Okay, now this is also another very kind of brief, fundamental or inclusive kind of steps. It's applied to all disciplines in academia. So you have to, the first thing that you have to do is you have to formulate the research question. And this question has to be, the question should be worthy enough to be explored further. And then it should give you, or it should help you to come up with a bunch of new ideas, so that it's going to be helpful for the new generation people. And after that, you're going to establish the objective. Why do you want to explore this question? What is so special about it? Whatever you're like, if you're trying to pursue your research in this particular field and you want to answer this, so that should help you yourself as a researcher to come up with a strong claim. So the objectives have to be clearly defined. Then the literature has to be surveyed appropriately. The hypothesis has to be formulated well. The data collection has to be done, and eventually you have to do the analysis and interpretation of the data. There are various methods available. The statisticians or economists or those who are into quantitative research, they have different software, different methodologies. For the qualitative people like us, we generally follow the the theory, and then we are trying to extend that theory to the set of data that we have in hand. So that's entirely up to your work, the kind of question that you have in hand. If your question demands a quantitative analysis, go for it. If it is manageable with the qualitative data, be there. And eventually, no matter whatever might be the research, your findings have to be substantiated through the empirical data. And then if you are trying to test the hypothesis, then you have to say that, yes, the hypothesis has been supported by XYZ substantiation, or you can say that it has been refuted. So that's how, this is the generic or the very, it's a common steps that you have to follow in any academic research. So with this information, I'm moving to my current area of work. I'm trying to understand interactional linguistics framework, typological framework. It has already been there because my PhD thesis was on this. And then eventually I'm also, this is the newfound interest, the diachronic framework. I have never really thought about it as a PhD scholar, but now I'm trying to find out how language change might have happened. So these are the three areas that I'm currently working on. And the linguistic framework that I'm working on is copula constructions, as Arpita just mentioned. So that's my most recent work. So I'm going to talk about first the sort of very general methodology, how I work on in these 3 different frameworks. Then I'm going to talk about how my popular research is going on. Okay, so now coming back to linguistics research, the research question, that is the most important thing, as I have mentioned. If you get the question correctly, then it will lead you to different steps gradually and eventually. So that is why I'm saying your question should be the most important thing, and then it should be worthy pursuing to find out an answer to it. So this is key to any empirical project. So when I say empirical, I'm talking about the empirical evidences in linguistics, the linguistic data, empirical data. And if your questions are nicely set, or if you could catch hold of the right kind of questions, it will lead you to the relevant data collection and analysis. And it will also help you to formulate a hypothesis that has to be investigated. And this one already I have discussed, the literature review, pre-existing topic, and the researcher's inquisitiveness. These are the 3 primary factors that helps us, the linguists, to answer or to seek for the answers that we want to have for the questions that we have in hand. Okay. Now, what sort of research question that I look for through my research? So primarily it's going to be an interrogative question or interrogative sentence. Either you want to ask, do these things happen, or what is it happening in this particular construction? ODI is a very interesting language. And then considering, so a lot of ODI linguists, they say this is the hyphen between North and South. And since I'm working in down South now, so obviously it's actually giving me a lot of very interesting questions to explore in terms of copula constructions. I do ask the typological questions even within the purview of ODI as a language. We do have multiple varieties, considering the majority of the audience here are from my state. So obviously we know there are Sambalpuri variety, Baleswari variety, Bhadrak variety, where I come from. And also down south, we have the Berhampur and Ganjam kind of variety. And each of this variety in Odia, it has its own idiosyncrasies, it has its own unique features. And then as far as copula construction is concerned, it's actually creating an interesting spectrum when you try to collect the data from the natural conversational discourse. So these are the questions that I'm asking. So what is happening, how it is different from this particular variety is different from the other one? Is Baleswar variety, is it similar to, let's say, the Sambalpuri variety? If it is different, so then what kind of difference is there? So these are called variation-centric questions. So this variation which would be within the category of ODI itself, this is going to be the micro variation-centric questions that I'm answering for the moment. Eventually, I'm trying to extend it to the macro level. So when I say macro level, I'm trying to do the typological analysis of copula constructions, not only in ODI, not only ODI and its varieties, but also other South Asian languages like Telugu or Telugu from Dravidian and Khadiya from Austroasiatic, because that helps me to answer questions like how the regional connections or the geographical proximity of Odia with, let's say, Khadiya is spoken in the western part of Odisha, the hills and the, if you go to Sambalpur or Sundargarh, especially Raurkela and the adjacent areas, we have a lot of Khadiya speaking population. And when I try to collect some data in Khadiya, as far as the copula constructions are concerned, very interesting patterns are emerging. So is the case with down south. When I went to Berhampur, Telugu influence has been so high that the negation in the copula construction is actually giving me some intriguing questions to explore. So these are different interrogative sentences that you will have no matter whatever research you are doing. Then the concern comes to whether you are going to have the primary data or the secondary data. If you're working in the theoretical research, then definitely you cannot do away with primary data at all. You have to go for the native speakers intuition-centric data, whether it is natural conversational data you are trying to collect, or you are trying to have like you are trying to find out the constructions on your own, just like we did it for, we do it for syntax. That's a different thing, but it has to be the primary data. You just cannot work using the secondary data set when you are a linguist. It has to be primary. And then the third point is that your research does it have the contributory feature, or it's going to contribute something like, is it going to answer the main questions? So as of my copula research is concerned, I believe it's going to answer the main questions, how to understand copula in Indo-Aryan languages. So when you think about, so I'll talk about it, what are the copula and how I started the work from Odia. But this he or hu or thila or ochi, so these are the copula phrases in different Indo-Aryan languages. And then you need to find out whether your question is overarching or it is a subordinate. How many questions are like the overarching questions or the main questions, and how many are the sub questions or the subordinates. Then you need to find out what sort of empirical data that you need, what is the methodological concern that you have, what is the theoretical grounding that you have. I want to work on copula, but I really don't know how the generativists account for copula, or how the functionalists account for copula, or how, let's say, how the historical linguists, they account for copula. If I don't know the theoretical understanding, my copula research is not going to be substantiated. So that is why you need to have a very strong theoretical background, no matter whatever research that you are engaged in. Then your data or your question should be research generated or the participant generated. Believe me, a lot of my questions, they come from the participant generated centric approach. Because when I talk to the informants, the kind of answers, like the kind of questions that they ask me, they also, that gives me enough space or enough scope to think about the next question that you need to address. I go to the field with a set of questions and I come back with a new set. That is why I call it more participant generated questions that I have in hand in terms of the copula research. And then whether it is speculative or empirical, that's a different story. And you can, it is entirely up to you whether you are trying to speculate something with the given set of data that you have in hand, or you're trying to say that, okay, I have these many examples, and then on the basis of this empirical evidence, I'm going to go ahead. Okay, so then now the question comes in linguistics research, whether it is as I have mentioned, interactional or diachronic or typological, in all the three domains that I'm working in, the question comes, what sort of methodology do I deploy? What sort of data collection process that I follow? Whether it is going to be qualitative or quantitative, or it's going to be both. So a lot of researchers now, especially Sunderland and Angori 2000 book, if you read the research methods in linguistics, they would say that, okay, this widely held dichotomy between qualitative and quantitative, which are absolutely diachronically opposite to each other. Sometimes they do not give you enough strength to answer your question. So it's always good to have an integrated approach. Just like, and this one I studied it during my PhD days. When I was working on my thesis, there's this strong dichotomy between formalism and functionalism. Those who know linguistics, the basics of linguistics, so the structure-centric approach, which is abstract, it's going to be the formal school of thoughts, and then the other one, how language is used in the discourse, that's going to be the functional school of thought in linguistics. And both, like these two approaches, they're diametrically opposite to each other, which is why there has always been a war between the lead researchers or the believers of these school of thought or this philosophical background. So now the need of the hour is that we have to bridge. So theory is important to explain your data, and your data is important to understand your theory. So considering there must be a kind of bridging, the gap between these school of thoughts have to be bridged in such a way that you can come up with an integrated approach. So something similar I'm trying to explore now through this dichotomy between qualitative and quantitative. So what I'm doing, I did collect data for copula constructions, and since this is interactional, I'm trying to analyze, or I'm trying to do natural conversational data analysis, and then I'm trying to count the tokens. Let's say copula elision is one of is very, very frequent in my language. So instead of, if you ask me what's your name, I'll not say my name is Anindita. I'll just say Mona Anindita. That's fine. I don't need a verb. I'll simply say Mo, that is my, Na, it is name, and then Anindita. I really don't need a verb there. Generativists are going to say, oh, there is a slot and there must be a VP. But then I'm not going into that for the moment. So when I do the natural conversational analysis, I'm trying to find out how many occurrences of copula elision do we see in a 30 minutes conversation. So if and you'll be surprised, 75% of copula-centric languages, 75% of copula-centric constructions happily drop ochi or ote kind of copula from the discourse. However, if you move to the formal discourse, you will find they're very much available. So if I want to write something, I can write Mona Anindita Ote, or if I want to invite somebody on the stage and I'm the anchor, and then I'll say, okay, now we have this speaker, and then I'm going to say, this person is this. Let's say those who can understand Odia is speaker ye Otanti. That means say linguistics is a border researcher Otanti. He is a wonderful researcher in linguistics. So in that case, I might use the term Ote or Otanti, but when I speak, I generally don't do. So this copula elision as a phenomenon, it has to be studied more carefully to understand the grammatical relation that it has with the other part of the sentence. So that is why what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to figure out not only the qualitative approach of this work, but also the quantitative tokens that I have to find out to claim a particular thing or to claim something about the copula construction. So that is why I'm following the mixed method designs. So I'm trying to bridge the gap between these two widely held dichotomy between qualitative and quantitative, and then the third paradigm that I'm adopting, and then I'm trying to claim that this is a necessary alternative because this has at least 3 beneficial points added to it. It would be helpful to construct comprehensive accounts. It will definitely apply more than one method so that you can easily predict, or you can easily claim something which would be taken by both the school of researchers, whether you are whether you are following the formal studies or the functional studies. Both the schools will have something to there is kind of takeaway for both the schools, and obviously that leads the path for the multidisciplinary research. If you want to work on NLP, considering the dropping of the copula it actually poses an interesting question as to whether which one is going to be, which language is going to be easier to follow the computational practice. So dropping the copula, Bangla is a language which drops it mostly. Odia also does the same thing, but at least in some instances of Odia, we do have copula. But the other hand, you go to Hindi, which is another Indo-Aryan language, it never drops the language. Sorry, it never drops the copula. You can never say me Anindita. You have to say me Anindita hu. So look at the typological spectrum that we have in hand. 3 languages, Odia, Bangla, and Hindi. They belong to the same language family. One language mandatorily drops it. One language drops it optionally, that is Odia, and one language mandatorily expresses it. So this typological division you find out when you go for more conversational analysis, because the kind of tokens that you get from a set of data or from a speech corpus that helps you to understand how to account for the questions related to copula in a better way. Okay, and how do I collect data, or what kind of methods do I deploy? First, I have already mentioned, I do a lot of conversational analysis. I also do narration and systematic elicitation, especially for the child language acquisition perspective. If I say my child who is 13 years old, he is one of the primary informants of my work, and the kind of copula constructions that he has in his speech, that gives me better insight into the understanding of copula as a linguistic unit or as a linguistic item. So the narration and the systematic elicitation is another method that I deploy to collect data. Then I also document things. So when I document, I do the glossing and the transcription. First, I do the transliteration, then I go for the transcription, and I try to find out what sort of differences should be documented, what sort of typological differences should be documented. And annotation is something I'm learning it recently. I'm not very comfortable with that, but one has to do the data annotation for that. But I'm not the best person who can explain this. This is something that I have in plan. I'm going to learn it very soon. Okay, now, so then what kind of research framework that I'm engaged in terms of the typological research? I do follow both. For me, this is going to be primarily micro and macro variation centric approach. As I've mentioned, when I say micro variation, I'm trying to figure out what are the different varieties of Odia and how copula can be accounted for. And when it goes to the macro variation, then I'm trying to figure out how Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, and Austroasiatic as the field of South Asian language would answer the questions related to copula. So, but then there are researchers, typologists who are working on unrelated languages also. One such, so it started from Greenberg. So Greenbergian functional approach, if you follow, he studied all kind of huge sample of language, and then he came up with all the generalizations. So there are statistical universals, absolute universals, then you have your implicational universals. So these are unrelated world's languages centric typological work. I'm not into that huge scale research in terms of typology. I'm focusing on a minuscule or a tiny number of or tiny variety of languages that I'm able to or that I'm exposed to. But as far as the typology research is concerned, you need to remember that it can either be related, it can either be a study of the related languages or it can be unrelated languages. So when I say related, it can be genetically related, it can be culturally related, or it can be geographically related, right? And if it is unrelated, there is absolutely no relation between these two languages. One example I have given, English versus German. They are genetically related. Both are Germanic languages. English versus Hindi, again genetically related. One is Indo-European, the other one is Indo-Aryan, but there has been some connection at some in the division of or in the language family or the tree of the language family. So even if it is distant, there has been a connection between English and Hindi. English and Chinese, there is absolutely no connection. However, researchers or the typologists, they're also trying to understand, without having any typological connection, genetic or geographical or cultural, can we come up with certain universals which are going to be applied to across languages. So it is entirely up to you what kind of research that you are indulged in. If you are like me, then you are primarily going to talk about the genetically or locally or the regionally related languages. So Austroasiatic Khadiya and Indo-Aryan Odia, they are not genetically related, but yes, they are geographically related because there has been a connection. Language contact-centric questions can be explored when you are trying to understand copula. Okay. And in typology research, please remember languages are going to study level by level. So it is up to you which level you want to explore. You can try for the syntactic levels, morphological levels, phonological levels, or pragmatic levels. So for me, I'm trying to explore morphosyntactic levels because in Indo-Aryan languages, morphology plays a very important role because our word order system is very flexible. Considering, so besides the syntactic approach, because when I look for syntactic variations at the micro level, hardly do I find any, because all these languages, they belong to the same language family, which is why syntactically I don't find much variation. But yes, there are very interesting variations emerging in the morphosyntactic level. So when I say level by level, if just like Paroma discussed before, if you're a phonologist, you can always study phonological levels in typology. If you're a syntactician, do go for the syntactic levels in typology. And if you want to study functional aspect of language, then go for the pragmatic analysis of it. It is so as of now, I'm indulged in, or I'm trying to understand the morphosyntactic details of or morphosyntactic leveling differences in copula constructions. And because copula raises a very interesting question that when it is moved to the sentence initial position, it marks focus. So that is a very significant syntactic difference that is emerging from the speech that we have. Okay, then I'm not going to talk about methodologies now. So now I'll show you how to do a study. And here, since I'm talking about my research, you can replace it with your research. But I'll just tell you how to go about any kind of typological study that you want to do. So as you remember, I mentioned one need to have a very strong theoretical understanding before you delve deep into the understanding of any linguistic phenomenon. So if you want to study, let's say earlier I was studying voice and especially passive voice constructions. So I was trying to understand how passives in world's languages have been accounted for. Now I'm trying to understand how copula constructions in the world's languages have been accounted for. So what the existing study, the literature review, which is very important in spite of or irrespective of whatever research that you are indulged in, you need to find out how other researchers or what other researchers have talked about in terms of these linguistic constructions are concerned. So if you look at copula is not a language universal, remember that. So there are certain languages which do not have copula at all. And there are languages which have copula. However, the copula-less languages are very few. It's only the Austronesian languages, or you can call it Tagalog languages. They do not have copula. For example, Chinese, Mandarin, right? It doesn't have a copula. But other languages like English, which is Germanic language, Italian, Russian, Hindi, Tamil, Mandarin, Mongolian, Japanese, all of these, they have copula. So the first question that comes to my mind is that, oh wait, this is a function, or this is a linguistic phenomenon which is not available across the languages. So then what are the languages that have it? So the languages which have copula constructions, what sort of typological variation I'm going to explore through my research. Then I'm trying to understand what the existing researchers have said about copula. So the first thing that I identified, primarily I'm quoting Pustet's work, Virginia Pustet. So and also I'm forgetting the other researcher's name. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll get back to it. So primarily the function of copula is that this is a linking device. So when you say he is my friend, that means you are linking he with my friend. So the most rudimentary work that copulas do, they try to link. And they are also the hitching posts. So when you say hitching posts, the linguist will understand, the non-linguist here among the audience, that means it can host and it carries. So hitching post means it is the carrier of what? It carries the TAM. TAM stands for tense, agreement, and also some languages, they have mood. So English, for example, doesn't have enough instance of mood marking, but South Asian languages have a lot of mood marking functions. So tense, aspect, and mood, that is decided by copula, and it is also an agreement marker. So when I say I, it will be am going. When it is or I am a teacher, he is a teacher, or they are teachers. So the agreement marking is it is one of the most important functions that copulas have. So you just replace your linguistic phenomenon with my copula. If you're working on voice, if you're working on honorification, if you're working on let's say nominalization, but you have to find out what the existing work all about, and where is the gap, and that gap you have to address. So in my research, the gap is in the South Asian languages. I didn't really find much of the work in terms of copula in South Asian languages are concerned. And then you have to, how much time do I have? I'll just then scroll through much of this.
No, you go through, no problem.
Okay,
No
so
problem.
then I would tell, or I would try to find out what more I can understand, or what more I can find out from literature as far as copula is concerned. Then I realized that, or going through the literature or doing the literature review, I realized that copula can be a nominal copula, can be an adjectival copula, it can also be a verbal copula. So what are these? When you say a construction like English, which is one of the most common languages that we refer to, because that's a lingua franca of the world. So that will be, she is Susan Smith. That's a nominal copula. And why it is a nominal copula? Very briefly, I'll tell you. Susan Smith is a noun. So here the subject she is linking the noun. And the function of is, which is highlighted in maroon, this is the linking device. And what it is linking? It is linking the subject with a nominal phrase. That is why, or a noun phrase. So we call it a nominal copula. Then the second one, she is quite outspoken. So when I say she's quite outspoken, outspoken is an adjective. So here, what function does the copula do? The copula is linking the subject she with the predicate quite outspoken. So then it's going to be an adjectival copula. And finally, the third sentence we have, she is currently advocating for climate change. So what is happening here? Is, which is the copula that is linking the subject with a verb. And what is the verb? Advocating. So these are the three different copula that we have in literature. Literature, or like existing linguistics literature, helped me to understand that, okay, these are the major categories or major types, because I'm into typological research. So one would be the nominal one, nominal copula, adjectival copula, and verbal copula. Now there is an interesting generalization that is emerging. If you look at, there is something called implicational hierarchy. So when you look at the hierarchical occurrence of copula, then you see type A is nominal, type B is adjectival, type C is verbal. So the generalization is that if a language has B, then it will have A. If it has C, then it will have both B and A. This is not my claim, this is the claim that I got from the literature. Literature review helped me to understand that, oh, right, this is what happening in terms of copula constructions in the world's languages are concerned. So, so if a language has B, that means if a language has adjectival copula, then it will definitely have a nominal copula. That means if a language has she is quite outspoken, then for sure a language will have she is Susan Smith. I'll go to Hindi now, or after that I'll come to Hindi. I'm not very comfortable, but I'll surely I'll talk about Odia. But Odia is not a great example because a lot of instances we drop the copula. So wo sundar hai. So in that case, in that sundar hai, so hai would be the adjectival copula. So in Hindi, if adjectival copula is there, which is B type, then it will definitely have the A type. So wo Susan Smith hai, or wo Anindita hai. So if वो बहुत outspoken है is possible means its nominal counterpart will also be there. So that's the implicational hierarchy that we have. And then if it has C means the verbal predicate. So if the copula is found in the verbal predicate domain, then it will definitely have in the nominal as well as the adjectival domain. So that is what we need to understand when we are talking about copula construction. So this is one of the most interesting observation in terms of the typological analysis of copula. Now my question is to find out whether what sort of generalization can I come up with in terms of the South Asian languages are concerned. So when you see, as I've just mentioned, in case of Indo-Aryan itself, there is a spectrum, or there is a different kind of there is a kind of spectrum. So I just mentioned Bangla mandatorily drops, Odia optionally drops, and Hindi mandatorily mandatorily expresses. So with this sort of a division that we have in hand, it surely poses some interesting questions to find out or to explore in copula constructions. Okay, so that's about English. So quickly, I'll then go to what is happening in one of the most widely studied languages in India or South Asia as a linguistic area. So here what is happening, the Indo-Aryan languages, you see this is mandatorily available. Okay, so wo mere shikshak thi, what will it be? This will be nominal because mere shikshak is a noun phrase, it's an NP. So what is the copula thi doing? This is linking wo with mere shikshak. Wo bahut pyari thi, again that is the adjectival copula, because bahut pyari is the adjective that is linked to the subject verb with the help of the copula thi. Wo meri madad karti thi. So karti is the verb and thi is the copula that is linking the subject with the verb. So this is the verbal copula. So now you see typologically English and Hindi, they behave similarly in terms of copula manifestation is concerned. However, if you explore the other Indo-Aryan languages, there would be differences emerging. And I don't know what will happen in other Indo-Aryan languages. I just have information for 3, Hindi, Odia, Bangla. There are languages like Marathi, Gujarati, Kashmiri, Konkani. There are so many Indo-Aryan languages around. So it will be really nice if we can find out what sort of typological variation do we have in case of copula constructions. Now look at Chinese. As I mentioned, this is an unrelated language. So typology is not just restricted to related languages. You can also explore it to the unrelated languages beyond a particular language family. So if you look at Chinese, it's very, this is almost like a rare kind of construction. So she is the copula. And 3A, the example in Mandarin Chinese, she, which is optional. Even if this is okay to have a nominal copula in example number 3A, most of the time the speakers drop it. They don't use, so they would say ta wo mama, so she's my mother. And in case of B, there is an asterisk. Those who can follow the linguistics conventions. So when she's very pretty, which is an adjectival copula, because of the presence of asterisk over here, you should understand that copula is absolutely kind of dropped. Like you cannot have a copula construction with an adjective. So is the case, you cannot have a copula construction with a verb. She is now helping me. So Chinese, which is an unrelated languages, behave very differently in terms of copula constructions. Okay. Then I'll skip this. I'll go to Odia now, the example that I was talking about. So in spoken Hindi, मैं एक शिक्षक हूँ is fine, but in spoken Odia, mu jane शिक्षक ote. Believe me, nobody speaks like that. Those are my fellow Odia speakers over here. I as a native speaker of this language, I never say mu Anindita ote. I never say mu sikhyaka ote. I would always say mu jane sikhyaka. I don't need a copula at all. So that's the reason why I drop it mandatorily. However, in Hindi, it's very unlikely to drop it. This variety, you know, this data actually came from a Bihari friend of mine. So probably the influence of I don't know, it could be language contact or something. If you show this sentence to a speaker from Lucknow or Kanpur or Delhi, they would say, no, I definitely need who there. But the Bhojpuri speakers, Maithili speakers who speak Hindi, they would say, it's okay, I can probably drop. And also the interesting concerns are in, there is this movie title, Mera Naam Joker. So when you look at this kind of a movie title, Mera Naam Joker, it's not written Mera Naam Joker Hai. So when you say Mera Naam Joker Hai, that sounds a little weird. But when you say Mera Naam Joker, my name is Joker, that's perfectly fine. But again, that's a specific kind of a discourse. That's just a movie title. Also, there are literary expressions, Mera Naam Hai Ravi or Main Kavi, something like that. So, but these are not really the kind of, we are not going to put it in the natural conversation category, which is why I would go with the typological division that I mentioned before. Hindi, type A, mandatorily manifested. Odia, type B, optionally manifested. Bangla, type C, mandatorily suppressed or mandatorily dropped. So I'm starting my claims from this. So I'll move to this one now. This other slide I can just skip. Okay, now when you are talking about, or when you are indulged in research, or when you are researching any given language, make sure you need to show its geographical, like its geography, its presence in the country. So if you look at this, so this is Odisha, you have to show, let's say you are working on a language in Himachal. So then you have to highlight Himachal. You have to show that because you know where your state exists in the country. But it's not that all the native speak, like all the audience would know where your state is. And unfortunately, it's such an embarrassing thing. But most of the time when I say I'm from Odisha, when I was in Delhi, they would count me as a South Indian. And when I'm here, they would count me as a North Indian. Because what is the geographical presence, like where does my state lie, is always a question. So that is why make sure when you are talking about a particular language, you do show the audience where does it or where is it spoken. If you look at this is an Eastern language, East Indian state. However, there is a significant amount of speakers. We call it Bichinnanchara, those who are familiar with Odia, these are the diasporic Odia population you will find in West Bengal, especially the Midnapur district. Then you have in Jharkhand, Jamshedpur and other places over there. Then come to down south, you have you have a significant Odia population in Andhra Pradesh. So Odisha as a state, Odia is the official language. But besides that, we also have Odia population spread across these regions. So you have to show that whenever you are talking about a language. Right. And then you move to how to approach or how to account for copula constructions. If you remember, I mentioned copula marks agreement in Odia. So then I have to show what are the other things that can mark agreement. Copula is not the Odia, the copula is not the only agreement marking device. There are other agreement marking devices also. For example, if it is there is a construction mo jhuni ko pitili. I'm sorry if there is an audience here whose name is Juni. So Juni is a very common name in my place. So she's my cousin here. So I keep hitting her all the time when I was a young girl. So in that case, mu Juni ku pitili. So you see, la is the perfective, the past tense marker. E is the aspect marker, which is perfective aspect, past tense, and this is the agreement. So this is first person, singular, non-honorific. I'll not take much time on this, but depending on the kind of linguistic phenomenon that you're working, you have to show it categorically how and which parts of or what kind of data that you have in hand, so that you can get a clearer idea about copula. So in terms of Odia, copula is not the only agreement marking device. Rather, we have the main predicates: hit, love, hate. So all these kinds of constructions are also marking the tense and agreement. So when it is first person singular, this is piti li. Second person singular, piti lu. And third person singular, it is piti la. See how the agreement marking is changing. But we don't have a copula here. But something similar you will see with a copula maybe I'll just skip these ones because this will take a lot of time. Okay, so the other kind of copula constructions that you will find out here in this one, in case of in case of say, which is third person singular non-honorific, this will be khaila, and when it is honorific, it will be khaile. So this is again going to the same thing. I'll go to quickly the copula example that we have in hand. So what I have shown, that there are other phrases which can mark copula too. So now we are going to copula in Odia. So in this case, this one I got it from a newspaper article. So IAS IPS Autanti Ethi Chari Bhai Bhoni. So look at where is the copula. The copula is here, Autanti. So if I speak, I'll say A Chari Bhai Bhoni IAS IPS. I can simply drop it, but this is a recent newspaper article, I think from Samaj or Sambada, I don't remember. Apparently there was a family where 4 of their siblings are IAS or IPS. Those who are not from India, IAS and IPS are one of the most, powerful positions in the country, the administrative positions. So considering all 4 siblings are from one family, this news was highlighted in the local news channel and the local newspapers. So IAS, IPS, Autanti, look at this. So the Autanti is very much available here. So even if we don't speak, but the moment you move to a formal discourse, you have the copula. But this example I have always been giving. When I speak, I drop it. I don't say Mona, Anindita, or Te. No, I would simply say Mona, Anindita. My name is Anindita. So that's how copula is attested in Odia. Now I would show how the constructions are, or what kind of functions does it have when we talk about copula constructions. Copulas can work in the simulative construction. Those who are new to linguistics, simulative means you are talking about the condition of a particular person. So Sathipai say chup achi. That means that is why he is quiet. And this data, this you have to mention. This is not a regular. This is not a constructed example. Remember, I used to work with the constructed examples when I was doing my thesis. That was in syntax, which is why the constructed examples were okay. But now I'm trying to move on the natural conversation analysis. So I did do some data recording, and one of the construction that I found there is Sathipai se chupachi. That means that's a simulative construction. He's quiet because of that reason. You can also have copulas in Odia in locative constructions. Uppare fulla kundotiye ochi. That means there is a flower pot on the roof. So I'm talking about the location of the flower pot. I'm talking about the existence of the flower pot. I can call it an existential construction. I can call it a locative construction, depending on the kind of function that it has. So you will have it over there. Then an interesting function happening in copula when they're in the sentence initial position. This is what I was talking about. Considering our languages are verb final, remember verb initial and verb final. So because they are verb final languages, you would always see copula at the end, at the final position of the sentence. You would say bada badmas otte, he is very naughty. Say jyota bada sundari otte, that girl is very pretty. So this otte would always be, or say ghare ochi, he is at home, which is a location or existential. However, when you have the copula move to the sentence initial position, it is actually marking focus. So when I say bada badmas thilla, I'm simply talking about he was a naughty child. He was very naughty. But the moment I say thilla se bada badmas, I'm focusing on the proposition, the entire proposition, his naughtiness. I'm trying to focus on that. So the movement of thilla to the sentence initial position is going to be treated differently in syntax. So now you go back to the levels that I was talking about. If you're working on the syntactic levels, this would pose a very interesting question to the generativists, right? So you have to find out how to account for a construction or how to account for the position copula in the beginning of the sentence. So that is what I'm trying to understand as a syntactician too. So now by far we have seen copulas in Odia can be simulative, they can be nominative, and they can also mark focus. But when they mark focus, they move to a sentence initial position. And now this is about the finding that I have had on my copula research. In spoken Odia, at copula is mandatorily dropped. I never say sikhya kote or mu anindita ote, that's mandatorily dropped. However, in certain instances like journalistic discourse, notices, when you see the notices, I wish I could show some data. There was a constable vacancy notification was there. one particular sentence was there, Prathi ka boyasa etiki hoithiba otte. So below 15 years, sorry, below 20 years or below 25 years, the candidates will not be considered. So when you are talking about a formal discourse, you have to categorically mention the copula. But otherwise, in the regular natural conversational data, you try to drop copula in the present tense. But in the past tense, no. If I say I was a teacher, I can never drop thile. I have to say mu sikhaka thili. Now I'm not. I have resigned, or I have become old, I retired, or whatever. So maybe 25 years ago, I was a teacher. So in that case, I cannot drop thile. But in the present tense, I have to drop. So that is also posing another very interesting, significant in syntax related question. How does it account for the dropping of otte in the present tense and mandatory manifestation of thile in the past tense? So that is why I'm saying when you are talking about the typological research, the different levels that you have to talk about, whether it is syntax or phonology or morphology, in each of the segments, in each of the levels, the questions are going to be interesting. You just need to choose one particular phenomenon and then try to explore which level appeals you. For me, morphosyntax appeals me, or syntax appeals me. For you, phonology appeals. Somebody else, semantics appeals. So then you have to find out what sort of typological questions you want to explore. Also, pragmatics is my newfound love in that sense. I'm really interested to work on pragmatic discourses. Okay, so now that was all about my copula research. So to sum it up together, what you need to do, first you have to find out the right kind of question. And once you get the question, you have to find out where to get the data from, what kind of work that you are in, whether you are into spoken discourse or written discourse. Mostly the linguists, they talk about the spoken discourse, because for us, if a language is spoken, it's a language. Whether it has a script or not, whether it can be written or whether it is written using Nagari script or Roman script or some other script, that doesn't really matter much. I'll not say it doesn't matter at all. Script is a big discussion in my home state now. You go to my Facebook feed is loaded with all kinds of script related discussions that is happening back home. So for some people, that's very important. And script is one significant factor, which is why Odia has an identity. Otherwise, it was always considered to be a part of Bangla. So considering we have a different script and it dates back to like 2000 years, so it is equally important, but my research is not into script. So I focus on the regular conversational data. But if you want to do diachronic research, as I mentioned initially, what does the diachronic research do? Diachronic research is going to give you an idea how language change has happened over the period of time. Let's say in 13th century or 14th century, Sarada's Mahabharat, those who are familiar with in Odia, the kind of language, the kind of Odia that was written there and the kind of Odia that we write now, there is a significant difference. So if you want to study how the language change has happened, what sort of grammaticalization process has happened, then you have to go for the diachronic analysis of the linguistic phenomenon that you are studying, right? So this was about my copula research, which is typological and interactional. Now I'll show you how the diachronic research I'm doing. I'm just starting it, so I really don't have anything significant to say. I'm sorry for the non-Odia speakers here, so non-Odia attendees over here. I'm just trying to show you what kind of data that I'm collecting. Those who can read Odia, you can figure out that these are, so this is my diachronic research is on voice, because my thesis was on passive voice. Since I worked on passives from a synchronic perspective, now I'm trying to understand how diachronically it has been accounted for. What sort of passive voice did we have earlier? And whether the occurrence of passive has diminished or increased or it has remained constant. So I need to do some quantitative analysis too. So what I did collect some data from the newspapers. So these are the, I'm sorry, people who cannot read the script, my apologies, but those who can read, please be with me. In case of, so I collected some data from the newspaper. So here you see, Bidhayakunku Baleswar COVID hospital re bharti kara. Most of the sentences are about COVID. So the MLA has been admitted in the hospital. The information was given to the administration. Prasasana Pakhyaru Suchana diya jaithila. Again, a passive voice. Aji Sudha 2 koti 58 lakh shramikଙ୍କ ନାମ ତାଲିକାରେ ଥିବା ଜଣା ଯାଇଛି. By far 2 crores 58 lakh what is that labels have been listed. So have been listed, have been given, has been admitted. So all these, so what I did, I collected some data from the synchronic discourse, from the newspaper discourse. journalistic.
Anindita, sorry to interrupt. So
3 minutes. Maybe I'm almost done. And then what I did, I went to the old diachronic literature, Rudra Sudhanidhi, that was written in like 15th century. Jagannath Dasanko Tulabhina. Then you have Madala Panji, which is one of the significant literary work that that is followed in the Jagannath temple. And then Chachari Leda, Prastavu Chintamani, all these, what I did, I studied old literary pieces of Odia. Fortunately, I read Odia and I write in Odia. And I come from an Odia medium school. So that's the reason why I have a very good command over the language. So the diachronic literature, when I tried to study, though I did my master's in English, I have never studied Odia formally. But now I find it interesting when I'm trying to understand it from a linguist, through the linguist lens. So I'm trying to figure out how the passives have been evolved or emerged through a period of time. So it's entirely up to you which discourse you want to choose, whether you want to do synchronic research or diachronic research. Synchronic research can be done following the interactional or typological or generative, entirely up to you. I come from a generative school of thought. Now I'm trying to extend my horizon. So you can, it is entirely up to you what you want to decide. You may start from one point, then you may move to another one. There is absolutely no hard and fast rule. I belong to a particular school of thought, I'll always be there. Not really. You might find your interest changing or evolving over the period of time. But no matter whatever research you are engaged in, whatever research you are doing, make sure identifying the right kind of question, collecting the right kind of data, and then doing the right kind of analysis would lead to a very good quality research work. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope these are a few references that I've cited, and thank you. Thanks for giving me an opportunity, Arpita. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you, Anindita, for your very important lectures. And I must mention that you have really kept us engaged through your whole presentation. And I myself got to know many new things regarding Odia. And I'm also working on my mother tongue. And when you work on your own mother tongue, it really gives the lots of interest to do research. You will start loving your research work. I can connect to you regarding this matter.
I'm very happy. Some questions, if there is any, I can maybe.
Yeah, so we will quickly take some questions. Can you read the chat box? Or
chat box? Yeah. Okay. I'll read the chat, right?
Yeah. So there is one question from Reshma. Can you see it?
Reshma.
Yeah. Thank you for your enlightening presentation.
Reshma, I don't see.
Yeah, actually she is asking about the Assamese language, whether Assamese...
Oh yeah, I got it. Yeah. Assamese seems to behave like Bangla or Odia. Yes. No, you know what? Assamese, Odia and Bangla, very likely they would have similarities because these are the Eastern Indo-European languages. Especially in the TAM marking and agreement marking, I do, because my PhD scholar is a Bangla speaker. I have family members from Assam, so I really know a bit of typological similarity that it has. So on the surface also they're very similar because these are the Eastern Indo-Aryan languages. But in terms of copula, I find Odia and Bangla, there is a significant difference. As I've already been reiterating this, right? Bangla mandatorily drops it. So I don't know, Paroma, maybe you can help me because my PhD scholar is not here. The data that she gave, you cannot say I am Anindita with a copula at the end. Paroma, may I?
Yeah. Hi. Bangla is the obligatory drop. And for somebody who is asking about Assamese, Diganta has some work on Assamese copula. He did his work in Stifel.
Yeah.
So there is copulas in Assamese, Ahomia, there is an MPhil dissertation.
Okay.
Diganta Kumar Nath. So the person can check it out actually. There is work on Assamese.
Yeah. So my hunch is that considering there is a lot of similarity, probably it will be optional, but then I cannot really claim anything now because I haven't got any data in copula constructions in Assamese. For the moment, the data that I have is Odia, Bangla and Hindi. And I'm trying to explore a bit of Gujarati. Gujarati behaves very similarly like Hindi. But Assamese, I I think it would be similar to that of Bangla, but again, I can't really guarantee that. One has to explore.
It's not as, it might be more similar to Odia than Bangla,
Odia, okay.
because it is optional, it is not obligatory drop like Bangla.
Okay, if it is, yeah, right. If it is optional, then it will be Odia type. If it is mandatory, then mandatorily dropped, it will be Bangla type. And if it is mandatorily expressed, it will be Hindi type. So these are the 3 types that I've identified so far. And I'm trying to explore if there are more typological divisions, or we can fit languages into one of these types. So Hindi, Odia, Bangla, I'm sort of putting it as the benchmark.
So there are some more questions.
Yeah.
Anindita, can you see?
Okay, right. Let me read. What are generally, so this is Sohart Kulkarni, what are generally the motivations for comparative research in unrelated languages? Yeah, it's a very interesting question actually. If you refer to Moravzik's book, Moravzik has recently written a very interesting book on language typology. There are certain things called language universals, right? So when you say language universals, you claim that all the languages in the world would have that feature. Let's say if I say all languages have nouns, and the world speaks around 7,000 languages, quote unquote, like it's kind of tentative number. But it's not humanly possible for a linguist to study all 7,000 languages. However, linguists, they depending on the availability of the languages that they have studied so far, and the mental grammar that we have, the generative framework of linguistics that we all believe in, we believe that there are certain set of rules which are available or which can be applied across languages. So considering when we are claiming something, one particular phenomenon which is available across languages, you must study not just the related languages, you also have to study the unrelated ones. Because 7,000 languages in the world, they're not related. A lot of them are unrelated, right? For example, English and Japanese, English Japanese or English Chinese. Japanese, which is a language isolate, and Chinese is a different language altogether. So unless you study both the related really doesn't else, but there is something called universal grammar. So in that case, you have to focus on the unrelated languages also, right? So that's what, and a very interesting set of data is given in Moravzik. There are these adpositions. Either it can be preposition or it can be postposition. In South Asian languages, it becomes postposition, and in a language like English, it becomes a preposition. So all languages would have adposition. So in that case, you have to find out whether that holds true. And 7,000 languages, it's not possible for you to study. So, but whatever languages you have in hand, you have to focus on the bigger repository. There is something called worlds. Those who are interested, you go to World Atlas of Languages, something like that, worlds. And they have a pool of like 3,000 languages studied so far. It's run by Martin Hasselmuth and Dreyer and Comrie, all these typologists, functional typologists. So it's very important to study the unrelated languages to claim something universal, because when you say universal, you're talking about a phenomenon which is available across languages. So you have to focus on that. I think I answered. Okay, then Shahila Zafar. What would you say are the reasons for the dearth of academic research on Indian languages as compared to the quality? This is an administrative question. Compared to quality and quantity of research in many other parts of the world, especially considering linguistic wealth available in India. Why don't you ask to our politicians and to the ministers? It's a very nice question. Thank you for raising. It's a sad state of affair, I would say. India speaks around 700 languages, the recent study, right? And how many universities have linguistics as a separate discipline, like as an independent discipline? Do you know? I can count in my fingers, right? So considering the linguistic wealth that India has got to offer, this is a haven for for the language researchers. This is a gold mine, literally. But unfortunately, we don't have enough trained linguists. I come from literature background. I moved to linguistics because of my immense love for this discipline. So, so my concern, I'm glad that at least somebody raised this
sorry. Kindly,
there's some noise from somewhere. Yes, so I think we need to have more universities where linguistics would be taught as independent disciplines. So
sorry, Anindita, kindly mute, kindly unmute your system. It just got muted. Yeah. Now it's fine. Yeah.
so what I'm saying, considering India speaks so many languages, we need more linguists, more trained linguists. And we have enough language enthusiasts, for sure, enough language activists, but then we also need language trained linguists to ask theory-centric questions, to ask questions which would help the policy making in a better way. So yes, that's an administrative failure, I would say. Probably in the coming days, we'll have more universities coming up where the independent linguistics department would be taught. Think about Odisha, like Utkal University doesn't have a linguistics department. I did an MA with linguistic specialization. My MA was in English, and I sincerely wish we had more linguists. I'm in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai now. Madras University doesn't have a linguistics department. We must, yeah. I'm glad that people asked, but I'm not the right person who can help.
Anindita, I have a questions.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
Hello. This is not really about linguistics, but related. What today we see is that the language is taking a different form in Twitter languages.
Right. Yeah.
Twitter languages. I was just curious to know that you are talking about the popular, dropping of the tokens. If you see the parsing point of view, so if they're missing some ote or chi or something like that. So if I am a linguist processing NLP I am doing, so there is a loss of token.
Yes.
So in case of Twitter, it is much more. It is not only the loss, there is no grammar, but also there is a something mutilation of words. The mutilation of words. So particularly when the computer scientists, we see that sentiment analysis we do.
Right. That's also an interesting area I have heard.
We are not able to follow the grammar because the Twitterite do not follow the grammar. So,
right. Yeah, I agree.
So the popular, missing of popular, the link, what you are talking about. So these things, this problem as a computational linguist, how do you see it?
I don't have enough expertise on computational linguistics, but whatever little understanding I have, I'll answer. This optionality of copula in the present tense is a serious question that the NLP practitioners are trying to understand, because this otte in Odia, it has multiple functions. And this can also be considered as a syncretic element. So the moment you have syncretism, it's going to be a problem for the NLP practitioners. So otte can mark location, otte can mark existence, otte can mark your adjectival predicate as an adjectival predicate. So when you are thinking about processing of this particular parts of speech, otte as a copula, it remains a challenge. So how to account for it? Whether you want to write it as a verb or as an auxiliary verb, or you want to or you want to put it as a main verb, that also remains a question. Because when you say so otte as an adjectival copula and otte as a locational copula, that's going to be a problem for NLP. But more than that, this thila kind of a construction, which is the past tense of otte. When you say sikhyaka otte and say sikhyaka thila, sir, I hope you are an Odia speaker and then you can understand. Yeah, okay, thank you, sir. So when you say
you are from Bhadrak, you are telling me.
Bhadrak, yes, sir.
I am from that area also.
Okay. So when you say Sikhyaka thila, thila is the main verb. When you say khai thila, thila is the auxiliary, like thila is the helping verb or the light verb, you can say. So this is also a problem for NLP. In certain instances, this works as a light verb or an auxiliary verb, khai thila. In certain instances, this is working as the main predicate. So the question that remains for the NLP researchers is that how to account for it, how to tag it, whether you want to put it as a helping verb or as a main verb. What kind of output do you get? That will, I think that will remain a challenge.
Yeah, but that is what computational linguistics is.
Yeah,
you have to manage it, because by tagging or by so you have a transitional network, you semantics, you make it contextualized, somehow we manage it. But the problem in Twitter processing is the missing of the word,
the number of
and mutilation of the word. So
the limitation.
usually what we do is that we just we took it filter out.
Okay.
That, these are words. But filtering out, you lose a lot of meanings.
Right.
This
I agree.
This is a problem. This is what. So this is what during my, you are not there, during my inauguration talk, I was telling that so how the new words come.
Right.
I was giving a example of the Bhimabhoi literature, or even any medieval India, medieval Odisha words. If you see, they use a word. Today you don't see those words.
Right.
So, and some words they have come out of blue. The poets, but some
that's a process that linguistics has. So we call it neologism.
Yeah, but this is what I'm telling. This is what probably the Twitter is also. It is the same process is working. And bringing out new word.
Right.
So what we are telling, these are all
these are very interesting questions to take up. Right. I agree.
This may be the new words coming up. That is what when my kids they talk. Some I think that these are slangs, but these are the
accepted ones.
These are the words they use. For them it is common.
Right. So, thank you. But these are the questions I would keep in mind for maybe I would explore it in future. But as of now, I'm just focusing on the structure. But then eventually I would like to, as I mentioned, I'm also interested for pragmatics. So what sort of pragmatic value does it carry? That's going to be.
I will maybe I will email you a set of words. Which you do not find, but with some poets in medieval Odisha poets. Used it.
Boile, for example, there is a word called boile. Boile is not used anymore, and then I never studied this. I always come from English background, but now when I read the old text, it's so fascinating in terms of like I'm looking at it not from a literary, not from literature perspective. I'm trying to find out the linguistic clues, linguistic cues that would help me to do my work. So boile has gone, it's not there anymore. So yes, so these are the questions the linguists of my generation should explore as a commitment to the first language that is.
That's what I'm telling. This is one problem which is
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So, Anindita, there is one question from Gargi Roy.
What is she writing? She's writing, I was wondering if the sentences in Odia which show optionality of copula are quite available in Bangla too. I don't know. Bangla, apparently it's mandatorily dropped in the present tense, Gargi. That's what Pratiti says, and Paroma also confirmed that. Maybe the variety of Bangla that you are speaking, would you like to elaborate a bit more on optionality of copula in these sentences to draw a distinction between two languages on the basis of syntactic strategy? Exactly, that's what I'm thinking about. So, a language which mandatorily drops, probably your variety of Bangla is Agartala Bangla. So that's why you have a different intuition. But remember, in present tense, in past tense, it's always manifested. The only difference occurs in the present tense. What is it? What is the present tense copula for Bangla? Chilo or something like that? No. What is the present tense copula?
Actually, okay,
I'm forgetting. Pratiti, my student, she gave me the data, but I forgot. But anyway, so you think about it. And so in Odia, it's actually optional, even if we don't speak, but in the formal discourse, we use the term like otte or ottanti, but in Bangla, it is mandatorily suppressed. So there is no way by which I would say optionality of Odia can be treated equivalent in Bangla. Not really. Maybe your variety is different. But
Anindita, can you just give me one sentence, just a couple of sentences, then, so that I can.
In Odia, the Odia
yes.
constructions.
Yes,
Okay.
you can go back to your slides.
Okay, I'll just show the slides.
Ma'am, in Bangla, the copula is hoi, hoi. Ami ekti me, hoi. Ami ekti me,
Right,
hoi.
right. And you don't use that in the present tense, right?
Right, Lisa. Ami ekti me. We just simply say ami ekti me.
Exactly. There is no verb.
We simply say ami ekti me. Ami ekti me, hoi. We don't say that.
Yeah.
No, yeah. In that case, we don't. Okay, so.
Okay, I'll show the slides.
Yeah.
You look at this. For example, this one. Ottanti. This Ottanti thing. Compare this with this. IAS, IPS, Ottanti. Ottanti is T form is the honorified form. That is why, because IAS, IPS is like the big job. So which is why we have used Ottanti. Otherwise, I could have also said Otte. So in this, considering this is a formal discourse, it's a journalistic reporting discourse. This is I mentioned this is I got this data from a newspaper article, which is why Otte would be kind of would be available in construction. But when it is spoken, regular spoken discourse, I drop it, right? I can also say, ideally, I should put it in bracket, in parenthesis. Okay, that is also fine. But why I didn't put it in parenthesis? Because this is how I collected the data. I didn't want to tinker with that. But if you ask me as a native speaker, I can simply say IAS, IPS, HRE, Bhai Bhoni. That's fine. These 4 siblings, these 4 brothers and sisters are IAS, IPS officers. So this would be mandatorily, so this would be optionally available. But I think if you have the same construction for Bangla, you have to mandatorily suppress it. You have to mandatorily drop.
No, Anindita, like I wrote in the chat box.
Okay, let me check.
So in Bangla also, you can have the holen, holo,
in the middle?
Copula. Yeah. In this context, 11. So
Okay.
that is right. In standard Bangla also you can.
In standard Bangla also. Okay.
It's
I'll ask.
Obligatory drop.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk to you later, Paroma, sometimes, because Pratiti is writing a thesis on this. So yeah, she gave me an impression that it's never manifested at all. So probably.
Can you go to the another sentence? Upore.
Another sentence.
Upore, something like above something.
No, these are all tense markings.
No,
this one you can say. This one. This is
another. Say chup achi.
Ache.
No, we can use.
Yeah, so this one, achi is still available. Yeah, achi is still available, but otte is mandatorily dropped. That's what I'm saying. I can say sathipai se chup. That's fine. That is also okay. But it is also frequently found because this is a conversational analysis that I'm doing. This is the data that I have collected and I have transcribed it. So life in Greater Noida. It was a part of a conversation that I had with my friend. So she categorically said this, Sathipai se chup achi. That is why he's quiet. So here also you see this is mandatorily expressed, and in Bangla also it will be mandatorily expressed.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So then.
And then can you go to the next slide? Another sentence.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Our pot.
This is existential copula, so it will be
existential is fine. I'm talking about the equative, the nominal ones. I'm a teacher. I'm Anindita. He's my friend. So these kind of constructions. I think in these kind of otte-based constructions, Bangla mandatorily drops it. That is what my understanding so far.
Anindita, Bangla drops it in its base position, but if you are moving the clause out of its base position, then you find the B copula, the holo copula, you can have it optionally there. Okay. So there is you need to look at
okay, so the base position it is dropped. Okay. Yeah. But it would, so that's an interesting syntactic question then. So we have to explore that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me interrupt now. Thank you, Anindita, for this brilliant talk and for this question answer session. It was
Did I miss out on anyone's question? I'm just quickly
okay.
scanning.
Okay, you can check
Just
it
quickly,
once.
some people have raised questions, and then just 1 minute. Are principles and parameters similar to absolute universal? No, no, no. Principles, parameters, these are like, this is a part of the generative theory. So there are certain principles which are available, and there are parametric variations. So when you say SOV and SVO, but the principle here is that there must be yes. So there are certain principles which are universally available, but parameters are variations. So the parametric variations, it's like the switch on and off kind of thing. So one would be preposition, one would be the postposition, but eventually this is adposition. So absolute universals there are certain principles which are universal, but parameters are not going to be part of the universal features in that sense. That is why they are called parametric variations. Certain parameters are available in certain languages, certain others are not there. I hope I answered. Very quickly, I'll just go through. Okay. Any question? No, I think I answered all of the questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anindita, for accepting my invitation and for this very interactive session. I really liked it. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Sandagomi. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, sir has written a message for you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you about it later. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have come to the last part of today's session, and which is very formal, but I must say it is very intrinsic part of any event. And yeah, of course, this is the vote of thanks. Just wait 1 minute. So to begin with, my humble gratitude goes to our founder, sir, Professor Achyuta Samanta, our registrar, sir, Professor Ganiranjan Mohanty, head CIR, Professor Sudarshan Nanda, Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Hrushikesha Mohanty, Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Sasmita Samanta, Dean School of Humanities and Associate Dean School of Humanities for giving me permission to organize this event. I'm greatly obliged to all of them. A big thanks to all the panelists, Professor Sandagomi sir, Dr. Paroma and Dr. Anindita for responding to my invitation, for motivating me, encouraging me to organize this webinar. Many thanks to you all for such wonderful talks and presentations. It really means a lot. And I would invite all of you to visit KIIT someday in future and share your knowledge with us in person. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank my all colleagues from the Humanities department for supporting me. I would like to share that the inspiration which I got today to organize this webinar, just by seeing them, their love and commitment for work, I have learned a lot in my last 1 year journey in KIIT. They are very much workaholic person. I really appreciate. And I must mention that I am very grateful to our Associate Dean, Sir, Professor S.T. Swain, for his continuous support. Only I know how many times I have called him, and he just he has given me the right direction to organize this event. I'm very thankful to you, sir. Many thanks to you. I also thank Dr. Sahel and Dr. Pallavi for trying their best to lead 2 sessions so nicely. Thank you very much. And I hope that we will do such collaborative works in future. I must acknowledge the wonderful and encouraging participants who have shown their great enthusiasm and interest on this webinar, which is a testimony to the fact that this webinar is so very desired and so important. I'm certain the inputs, experiences, and knowledge, ideas shared by all the speakers and the question answer session would be of great help to all the present and future research scholars, students, and all other participants in a significant way, in a remarkable way. I'm quite sure. Finally, I would also like to thank our ICT department for their continuous technical support throughout this webinar. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you. So with this, I would like to conclude today's webinar. Hope to see you all in person in future. Thank you, Sandagomi sir. Thank you, Anindita
Thank you very
ma'am.
much. Yes. Thank you,
Paroma ma'am.
Anindita.
Thank you, Paroma ma'am. Everyone, thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you,
you very
sir.
much.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, VC